In 2014, an extraordinary discovery was made in the fields of Galloway, southwest Scotland. It would reshape our understanding of Viking Age history in this region and far beyond. Treasure made of silver and gold emerged from the ground.
Most significantly, almost right away, you could see the underside of that cross.
Intricate containers were unearthed, covered in ancient fabric.
This hoard in particular was quite challenging for you as a conservator.
The textile was very important and we wanted to preserve that.
Some of the most precious objects are now revealing their secrets.
The lettering is almost manuscript.
And it reads from the top, Higwald.
This spectacular hoard gives a unique glimpse into a world where cultures converged. It became known as the Galloway Hoard. Join us as we journey into the past, piecing together the story of a treasure that lay hidden for over 1,000 years. I've come to the Collections Centre of National Museums Scotland, where the fascinating Galloway Hoard has been cleaned, conserved and researched. To introduce me to the discovery is researcher Dr. Adrian Maldonado.
Adrian, this is extraordinary. I mean, it must have been an incredible find at the time. When was it discovered and where was it found?
So in 2014, a group of metal detectors were working around the village of Balmagee in what's now southwest Scotland, Dumfries and Galloway.
It has been laid out so beautifully. Is there a method to that? Is there a reason that you've got these 3 sections?
Yeah, that's right. We've sort of laid it out very nicely. This was found, the cross was found tucked in amongst these bars and arm rings of silver. But the bar shape and the stamp of those arm rings, the decorations on those arm rings, are something that jumps out to anybody who knows a little bit about early medieval archaeology in Britain. It jumps out to you as specifically Viking Age objects. And where you find those in hoards, you can date them to the 9th or the 10th centuries, more or less. And so we're probably looking at the Viking Age, but around the year 900. Now this one was already a standout because of this rare and unique cross that was wedged within it.
In 900 AD, Galloway stood on a crossroads between cultures from Britain, Ireland and Scandinavia. It's believed Galloway's name is derived from the Gauld Gael, or Stranger Gaels, reflecting a people of mixed Gallic and Norse descent who came here in the 10th century, around the time of the Hoard. Largely pagan Vikings had settled nearby in Cumbria and the Isle of Man, but Christianity was flourishing too.
This is quite a rare and unique object. It's a cross, a Christian object, you can tell right away, but there's something different about it. It has its chain, the way that it would have been suspended around one's neck, wrapped around it. You could almost see it being taken off of somebody's neck and being placed in the ground.
The detail on that chain is, I mean, obviously there's a huge amount of detail here which we'll talk about, but the detail on the chain, I didn't think that it actually might be original.
That chain itself is almost unique in this time period. There's almost nothing else like it. It's a fine silver wire that's been wound around a core of organic material. And we've since done proteomic analysis and we've narrowed it down to cattle material. And so we think it's cattle gut.
Oh my goodness.
The inside of that. But yeah, the outside is silver wire.
Wow. And it obviously tells the story of various Christian icons as well. Can you explain who is on each of these 4 corners of the cross?
If you look closely at the iconography, the human symbol with a halo around his head, the winged lion, the eagle, and the ox. And these are the symbols of the 4 evangelists, Luke, Mark, Matthew, and John. It's almost complete, it's almost undamaged, except there's this empty bit in the middle. that central setting may have symbolized Christ himself. And the core of it is silver, inlaid with gold, and so a very costly object as well. So it may have belonged to a bishop, an abbot, or an abbess.
The beautiful cross, silver bars and arm rings were found near the surface of the ground, grouped in a single layer. But the Galloway hoard had only just begun to reveal its secrets. The archaeologists dug down, working their way meticulously through the top layer. But this was just the tip of the archaeological iceberg. A huge surprise lay beneath.
And so you do the responsible thing. Let's see if we've missed something, and you wave the sort of metal detecting wand around one more time, just to make sure you've got it all. And what they got was a huge booming signal. It was still kind of, there was still something there, even though they thought they had finished digging. And so the archaeologist goes back and clears out the gravel that he thought was a sort of natural gravel. And sure enough, underneath that, there was another layer of silver, and that's what we've laid out here. And so what we found was that this was just the upper deposit of a much larger, lower deposit of silver.
Wow.
As they dug to the second layer, 3 incredible hidden packages were revealed. As the earth was cleared, they could see a vessel, and yet more silver bars and arm rings.
The bulk of this hoard, in terms of its weight, is bound up in these silver bars. These are objects that we call ingots. They're just a handy way of melting down your silver into nice portable bars.
Okay.
You can see kind of at a glance how much money you have.
This is personal wealth.
It looks like it, yeah.
Like having banknotes in your wallet. This is the equivalent in the Viking Age.
That's right, but these would be some pretty good banknotes. You know, you're not talking about a couple of pounds here, 50 and 100 pound notes. So the other objects that you have displayed here, aside from those bars, those ingots, are these beautiful stamped arm rings. And so these are arm rings of a type that we do find in the Viking Age around the area of the Irish Sea.
Okay.
They're probably made in Ireland, but we find lots of them in northern England, in the parts of the world that eventually come to be known as the Danelaw under Scandinavian control.
Okay.
But there was never a deposit of this kind of silver as big as this in Scotland.
Have you been able to identify any of them as to potentially who they might have belonged to?
So that's one of the most amazing and unique things about this hoard. Some of these were actually marked, and those markings are things that we can recognize. Those are runic characters.
Yes. What do the runes say exactly?
So this is the interesting bit. This is the Viking Age, and we assume this is maybe deposited by Vikings themselves. We know this is the kind of object that they like to carry around and bury in these great treasures. But those runes, when we took them to our sort of runologist colleagues, they were recognized right away, not as Viking runes or Scandinavian runes, but as Anglo-Saxon runes. It's a very similar alphabet, but it's the one that's used on this side of the North Sea.
So you've got a fusion of both Viking and Anglo-Saxon already.
It's what it's looking like, yeah. And so these are Anglo-Saxon runic characters, and where we can read them, they do contain Old English words. And so whoever is behind this, there's at least somebody involved who is literate and an Old English speaker, and maybe more than one. So as far as we can tell, 3 of those arm rings contain elements that are in Old English and could be abbreviations of personal names. In southwest Scotland, around the year 900, we're in a really interesting period where the records that we have, the historical documents that we have, kind of slow down and blink out of existence for a small period of time. And so we know that Galloway in southwest Scotland is part of the Northumbrian Anglo-Saxon kingdom, but there are also British speakers in the kingdom of Strathclyde, which has recently formed further north, and they're now starting to dominate in the southwest as well. There's also Gaelic speakers from Ireland already present in Galloway, and so you have a multiplicity of languages already, and then you throw in these Viking raiders as one aspect of it as well.
So people living within these communities are from various different cultures. that lived experience is going to be demonstrated in their cultural output, like what we see here in this hoard.
Absolutely. So in the year 900, we are really at a historical turning point for the region that we now call Galloway, from that period of Northumbrian Anglo-Saxon control to a period where we actually don't know a lot about who is in charge. And this hoard falls right under that little hiatus. And so what we can tell about the Viking Age in Galloway is coming in large part from archaeological excavations and finds like these.
We don't know why these precious treasures were placed in the ground, but it's tempting to think they were hidden there for safekeeping during this turbulent time of change, around 900 AD. And the owners didn't return to claim them, so they remained buried and forgotten for 1100 years. But as the archaeologists painstakingly excavated the finds, they discovered ever more extraordinary objects, including this tangled group of silver.
Deposited next to this parcel of silver that you see here was this phenomenal and really quite unique object.
Wow.
So this turns out to be a stack of very elaborate versions of those silver arm
these
rings.
look like the finished version.
They are in that complete annular form. That means that they could be worn around the wrist, unlike most of those arm rings which had been flattened or bent and folded. Those 4 armbands are bigger, heavier, more complicated in terms of ornament, and they're all tied together with a smaller 5th armband.
Would that have meant they would have been worn by one person, or do you think they were tied together as a form of preservation?
If you look in detail at these, you can see that some of them are really quite worn, and some of them look like they were cast and decorated just before they were deposited. And so actually, I think these rings belong to a group of people coming together. And the fact that there's 4 arm rings is interesting because we have the 4 runic inscriptions in the lower part of the hoard as well. And so you're beginning maybe to build up a picture of who were these people? Why did they come together? One more interesting thing about this bundle of arm rings is that tucked inside of it were these 3 gold objects. There's a finger ring and another ingot, another bar of gold. So that's pretty typical. You could find those in Viking hoards as well, although gold is a lot rarer. But this bird pin is a complete one-off. There's very few examples that look anything like it, and this would have been a very personal item. Whoever wore this would have been remembered by that object, and if you saw the object on its own, you would think of a one particular person.
It's very beautiful.
But the finds kept coming. Next to the arm rings was another object, a vessel with a lid. Inside the vessel, during the excavation, in laboratory conditions, the team gradually uncovered what proved to be some of the most fascinating artefacts of all.
These objects are very rare in Viking Age hoards. There's very few of these disc-shaped brooches, and none have been found in Scotland before this. There are some objects that are completely unique to the Galloway hoard so far, so these quadrilobrate lobed brooches.
I love them. They've got these extraordinary little faces on.
Yeah.
They remind me of almost church corbels and gargoyles. It's almost meant to be quite humorous.
Absolutely, and they're instantly iconic, aren't they?
And is this gold inlaid inside these clasps as well?
That's right. These are silver objects with gold inlaid. And these objects here are decorated in a distinctive form that's called the Trewhiddle style. And that's important because this is a kind of art that is used in Anglo-Saxon England around the time of the Viking Age.
So again, another fusion of this Anglo-Saxon and Viking detail within the whole hoard altogether.
The more you look at the contents of that lidded silver vessel, yes, there's gold, yes, there's silver, but then there's materials as well that you wouldn't necessarily call precious. There's glass objects, and some of these
bead type.
Yeah, some of these beads, and you can see that some of them are really very heavily worn. These are bashed up kind of old objects. And so you begin to think, why would these be stored in amongst the other gold and silver treasure? And I think it means that this has to have some other kind of value, an intangible kind of value to whoever buried it.
Emotional value.
It has to be. I think this must have been heirlooms, if they're anything. These are family heirlooms that have been passed down the generations.
This is tangible human connection. That's extraordinary. So what was found inside this carefully preserved vessel is very different to what we were looking at over here. What does that tell you when examining it?
It's almost like a little time capsule, a little snapshot of the world as seen from the perspective of someone in Galloway around the year 900. This is a glimpse of the Viking Age that is not exclusively about Scandinavian warlords.
These objects were all contained within this very unusual vessel, wrapped in fabric. Opening and investigating it has been a fascinating challenge for the conservation team of National Museums Scotland. Dr. Mary Davis has carried out much of this painstaking work, literally unwrapping the Galloway hoard, preparing the vessel to go on public display for the very first time to mark the 10th anniversary of its original discovery. I'm getting a sneak preview.
Mary, this is fascinating what you're doing. I hope you don't mind that I'm peering in over your shoulder and watching, but I'm absolutely fascinated with the level of detail that you're taking and attention to cleaning the lid of this vessel.
Yeah, we do try and do most of the cleaning of archaeological material and most of the cleaning from this hoard using tools. It gives us much more control. And when you work under a microscope, you can see the detail of what you need to take off and how much you need to take off. So I have a variety of implements that I use.
This hoard in particular was quite challenging for you as a conservator, wasn't it? What was it particularly about the vessel that proved so problematic?
Well, the vessel has several layers of interest and problems. The first is that it was completely wrapped up in textile. You can see the linen sticking there, and there was also some wool, which had been mineralised onto the surface of the object. The textile had also caused the copper within the silver to corrode, and this had come out as a green layer all over the surface of the object. And the green corrosion crust was actually harder than the silver and the gilding lying underneath, which makes it very difficult to remove. And we also wanted to remove that layer to show the original surface, but preserve the textiles, because the textiles are such an integral part of the object and quite rare in archaeological discoveries.
Yeah, and they can tell you so much. I mean, do you know exactly what sort of textile this was wrapped in?
Well, it seems to have been wrapped, bundled up in a piece of linen that was tied at the top, and then almost like a woolen overcoat over the top of that. And so it had 2 layers of textile preserving it.
This looks remarkable since it came out of the ground. How did you get to this point in your conservation process?
Well, we thought a lot about what we needed to do and how much we could show. And the difficulties were, the textile was very important and we wanted to preserve that. The silver was covered in the green corrosion, which was harder than the underlying substrate, and we wanted to be able to show some of the gold and silver, and that would be really difficult to do mechanically. So we chose to try and clean it using a laser. So we did this for the majority, going round it.
Laser cleaning helped both to preserve the remaining cloth and reveal details of the beautiful silver gilt vessel. Remarkably, the corrosion of the copper had actually helped to preserve the organic cloth, as it killed the microorganisms within the fabric.
Some of the cloth is really highly mineralised and it's all covered in green copper corrosion, but some of it is quite well preserved and you can see its original colour, and so you can work out what fibres they were, for instance, whether it's wool or linen. And you can send some of these to have dye analysis to see if there were any colorants. You can also do radiocarbon analysis to find out a date. So the preservation of organics is really important.
That's so exciting.
So, over 1,000 years ago, this remarkable vessel was wrapped in linen and wool and buried upside down with its lid on. It created a micro-environment that water couldn't percolate into, meaning it stayed relatively untouched in the ground. Inside, the archaeologists could see an incredible cache of objects, some of which I looked at earlier with Adrian. In laboratory conditions, 2 wrapped packages were carefully excavated from within the vessel, with glimpses of gorgeous artefacts inside. They have been conserved, and I'm getting to see them up close with Dr. Martin Goldberg.
So Martin, these beautiful objects were separated from the original hoard. Why is that?
Well, each one of these was a separate bundle. So these objects were hidden from us. They had been carefully wrapped by their original owners and carefully packed inside the lidded vessel. And all of that organic material that surrounded them was sort of our ultimate challenges, particularly in conservation terms, but also amazing opportunities to learn a lot more about the people that had owned these, the places that they'd come from.
They're incredible and so detailed and so bright as well. I mean, they look incredibly rich and expensive to me now. I can only imagine what they would have meant to somebody 1,000 years ago. Can I ask you just to explain what they are?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to begin with this one here. This is beautiful. It looks as if it's maybe a pendant.
Yeah, so there is a hole at the top, and in that was a piece of silk cord, and the silk cord interconnected this whole group of objects, and so that would have been worn as a pendant, and it's got this amazing gold filigree and granulation framework around it. But the stone that's inside it isn't what you would expect to be treated in this way with all of this lavish gold decoration. It's a very common type of stone called a schist. It's a metamorphic stone, so it's very widely available. But what we think that was used for, it was a touchstone. So it gives you a surface that you can test the quality of gold against. And so when Mary analysed this object, she picked up the traces of gold streaks on the surface. And so this is somebody who has the ability to test gold, to handle gold. They're perhaps trading in gold. They want the finest quality material. And obviously what it's buried with is the finest quality gold work that is available at the time.
Right, so this had a functional purpose.
It did originally have a functional purpose, but then it's almost like it's been treated like a relic itself. So there is a pyramid cap on the end of it that is shaped to the original shape of that stone, but there are small clasps, and so technically that black stone could be slid out and could be used for the purpose that it was intended for. But we think that it's something older than the material that it's found with, and it looks like it has been treated as something special, as something older that needs protecting, and also that needs celebrating, you know, with that amount of gold lavished on it.
And it would have been worn with these ornaments attached to it.
Yeah.
Can you explain what these are? They look like little animal heads, perhaps a tiger and some crocodiles, but do you think in this period that it's more just bestial or whatever it is?
Well, everybody sees what they have in their own imagination, but what they're trying to do is give the impression of a creature, and whether that is a real creature or a creature that was in their imagination, we don't really know. But this would have been worn as a set, and so these long sockets are actually the functional bit, and that's what the silk cord was sort of clamped inside. And then the silk cord ran through the 4 shorter sockets of this central one and presumably looped and took in this pendant in some way. And so this is a set of dress items, very, very high status dress items. Like much of the material in the hoard, these objects are normally found in England. This is the first time that there's a group of them in Scotland. But this group can help us understand all of the rest of them because they're a complete set together.
Another object in the group is an absolutely stunning carved crystal with overlaid gold detailing and a shape that seems to allude to classical design.
This one reminds me of, it's as if it's a upside down Corinthian capital from ancient Rome or ancient Greece.
Yes, there is the decoration on the surface of the rock crystal. If you turn it, it's very like the capital of a column. But what has happened to this is it has then been transformed into a jar, and so the spout is at the top and there is a hollow in the middle that spout connects to. But on the base is an inscription, and the inscription reads from this top left corner where there is a little Christian cross, and you can trace the letters in the gold filigree and granulation all the way around the square base, and it reads from the top, Higwald. So it's another Old English name. It's a name that we know from Northumbrian sources, but it's then describing who this person was. So it's EPS, Episcopus, and it's Bishop Higwald had this made or made this. And so we've got a commissioner's name, which is just amazing.
The lettering is almost manuscript as well.
Yeah, the little tiny granulation balls of gold are almost forming the serifs in the letters. It's really cleverly done.
Historians couldn't find any other references to Bishop Hughes, but it's a tantalising glimpse of the powerful man, probably Northumbrian, who commissioned this beautiful object that ended up in the Galloway Hoard. X-ray images reveal its intricate construction, gorgeous gold designs worked around the transparent core.
And this looks like raw material. Is it a crystal or glass?
It is. No, it's rock crystal. It's a very pure form of crystal. They would have been seeking out sources of crystal with beautiful clarity. The carved surface, there's a lot of technological expertise needed to carve that particular hardness of stone into that shape. Because this hoard was buried around, we think around 900 AD, the comparisons for a type of object like that would normally be in the Islamic world, where in the 10th century there's a sort of boom in production of rock crystal objects. And so that was where we started off looking. But the way that surface is carved, and like you said, like a Corinthian column capital, eventually we sort of tracked back, and the Vatican collection has a series of rock crystal columns of the same size, with the same drilled hole through the middle that allows you to connect the pieces of the columns together. That is by far the closest comparison that we've been able to find. The fact that it's got a Christian name on the base, helps us make that association. But again, it's a relic. That object was probably 500, 600, 700 years old at the point where it was then covered in gold and made into a jar.
I mean, it is extraordinary in the detail, in the binding. It's been so carefully put together. But there's something else here that is unique in its opposite attraction. What are these two obscure little balls that we have next to you?
Well, these are my favourites. These two balls of dirt are in such contrast to those luxury materials, and yet they presumably had some sort of similar value.
What do you think makes this so important? Important enough to be contained inside the vessel with these objects?
There are theories that we have to work with, but you need some evidence for those theories. And so when Mary started her analysis of the material inside the vessel, she picked up very, very microscopic traces of gold on the surface of these dirt balls. So we got them CT scanned in partnership with the British Museum, and that demonstrated that the gold is throughout the dirt. And so these were rolled. You can almost see, you know, like how children would with plasticine.
They look almost man-made,
Yeah.
actually, in that respect.
So you can almost see the hands that would have
Yeah.
formed these, rolled into sort of sausage shape and then connected and rolled into a ball. And in the process of doing that, whatever environment they're in, they have picked up traces of gilding, traces of bone. There are bits of organic material in there, what looks like grass. And so these are all clues for us about where these might have been formed. And so you have to imagine an environment with gilding in it.
Okay.
For me, this sort of gave me the taster, the clues that I needed to pursue a particular theory, which is that pilgrims would visit holy places, and one of the things that you could bring back from those holy places, almost like an essence of those sacred places, was local dirt rolled in the environment and then brought back almost like a souvenir. And I was looking for comparisons, and in the Vatican in Rome, again, like the rock crystal, there is a collection of earth relics, and they used to have little labels on them, and the labels would say where they had come from. And the paleography of the writing tells you that they were collected between 650 and 900 AD, so right in the period that this collection is coming together. But the places that they're interested in are places in the Holy Land. So their labels say Bethlehem, the banks of the River Jordan, the Temple of the Holy Sepulchre. And so the Temple of the Holy Sepulchre has loads of gilding inside it. And you could imagine an environment like that would be the type of place that these would be formed.
Like souvenirs.
Yep.
And possibly that perhaps whoever acquired them paid for. These might have been commercial products of the vicinity that they were created in order to sell to pilgrims.
But the value is really the spiritual value.
Exactly.
You know, that's what gives them meaning, and that's what creates the value that means they are important parts of this collection, perhaps as important as anything else.
And perhaps to commemorate the journey in itself, because that's an extraordinary journey to undergo in this period. It's long and it's extensive and often dangerous.
Yeah. And those are the types of stories that all of these objects carry with them.
So a picture is emerging that connects a location in Rome or the Holy Land, perhaps in Jerusalem, with pilgrims travelling across Europe, bringing objects, even balls of dirt, all the way back to distant Galloway.
But in terms of a journey, the thing that we have learned most recently about this vessel is that it probably travelled the greatest distance of any of the material in this hoard. The iconography of it was always slightly curious. So there are other vessels that have been used as treasure containers for Viking Age hoards. But this one stands out. There are leopards and tigers on it. There's something that looks like a fire altar with a crown emerging from the flames. And these are unusual things to find, especially in Christian Europe at this point. And so we've been working again on a theory that this is an object that has travelled a great distance from Persia, from what is modern-day Iran. And we've recently had confirmation through scientific analysis of the silver and the yellow decoration that this object is, again, a relic of an ancient empire, the Sasanian Empire, that was based in modern-day Iran.
The Sasanian Empire thrived in Western Asia in the 6th and 7th centuries and spread their cultural influence across the globe. It is incredible to imagine how the silver-gilt vessel could have made its journey halfway around the known world, from Iran to a distant corner of southwest Scotland.
You know, the journeys that some of these objects have been on are just incredible.
And that adds to scholarship that demonstrates that the early Middle Ages were not periods of infighting and darkness, but actually a huge amount of shared culture, experience and travel.
Yeah, Well, there is always those other elements to it. There's always truth to the stereotype. There is an established historical narrative for all of that. But what a find like this does is give you new aspects, new stories, new material, and sometimes things that people have never thought of before, you know, that people could be going to the Holy Land and collecting earth relics at this point, that a Sasanian vessel could travel thousands of miles to be the container for what looks like a family's history, you know, a family's heritage. These are things that before this hoard was discovered, I don't think people would have really considered as part of that narrative that we have of Britain and Ireland in the earliest Viking Age.
Is there any further research to be done on the Galloway hoard, do you think?
There's endless opportunities here to learn more. This really is, it's a great story so far, but I'm sure there's more to be said.
The Galloway hoard is an absolutely extraordinary discovery that will keep revealing its secrets for years to come. Unwrapping it enables us to look into a period of the past that was previously obscured, seen only through a glass darkly. Now, thanks to this remarkable excavation, conservation and research, it is coming into sharper focus, unlocking a fascinating cosmopolitan era of wealth, communication and beauty.
Deep beneath the picturesque hills of Somerset lies an ancient subterranean world of caves that for nearly 15,000 years concealed a disturbing secret. Hidden in the darkness, archaeologists discovered gruesome evidence of what could have been an Ice Age crime scene. Hundreds of human bones, stripped of flesh, smashed, scarred, broken, and in some instances, skulls shaped into what looked like cups. The remains revealed something truly shocking. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors feasted on their own. Today, these remains are on display at the Natural History Museum in London. But working behind the scenes are a team of experts determined to unlock the secrets of the Goths Cave Cannibals. I've been given special access to meet the team and get a glimpse of the incredible work they're carrying out. Selina, it is wonderful to see you again. Thank you for inviting me here.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's always a pleasure.
And what an array of things we have in front of us. I recognise that, I think. Is that...
This is a replica of one of the skull cups that's on display. Yeah. So, do you want to...
Yes, of course. I mean, do we know much about this and how it was crafted or anything about that?
Yeah, so obviously this is a cranial vault. And this would have been very carefully made to have kept this entire structure here. Would have taken a lot of skill, quite frankly. We know that they used sort of stone and bone and antler tools, and they would have used these to sort of cut away or knock out these things and make these percussion marks, as you see going round, to very carefully remove that part of the skull to turn it into this actually quite beautiful shape. Very, very controlled marks that we can see on these skull cups.
So this is the replica right there. And I'll
Absolutely.
Now.
Yeah.
And the real stuff, I guess, that we have in front of us.
Yeah.
Is that another one over there, another cranium?
Yeah. So this is another skull cup. I'm not even going to pick this one up. That's all right. This is an original. It's incredibly delicate. So you can imagine, the care that would have to be taken to create these. But you can even see on some of the back here. So this is what we would call a controlled percussion mark across here. Yeah. Or they would have used a tool to sort of knock that through. So it would have been like probably a stone flint or potentially a bone hammer or maybe an antler. But this would have taken huge amounts of care. But this is another original human skull cup there.
Also, there's more than one skull cup that was discovered.
Yeah, there are actually 3 skull cups found from this site. Yeah, 2 adults and one from a very young child.
Feels like the skull cups will steal the show, but at the same time we have all these other remains in front of us. What else have we got here?
We actually have a huge amount of postcranial material that was found at the site. It's something like 200 bone elements or fragments of bone, but all in really small pieces. This is quite typical for what you see for the whole collection. This is just a small part of it. A lot of the materials here, it's not easily recognisable, as you say, but the majority of these are actually like leg bones. These are sort of femurs, but then we have 2 arm bones here. We have this one, which is a radius. This is a forearm here.
Arm bones, leg bones, and of course,
And the mandibles.
regarding the date, how old do we think all of these remains are?
So these have been radiocarbon dated to 15,000 years ago.
So that's the late Ice Age at this time in Britain. What do we know about 15,000 years ago?
It was from a human perspective. It was the time in Britain at the end of the Magdalenian people. So these are Magdalenians. In terms of the environment, we know more about the environment from things such as the faunal remains in the cave at this time, but also things like pollen as well. A cold period, but this is where it started its warming. We're going into the warmer phases here because you've got humans. We think from this cave site anyway that there seems to be evidence of there being willow and alder and hazel, so like some woodland starting to grow back. But from the fauna, we know there is things like reindeer, there is red deer, and there's a lot of horse. But we still see some signs of Arctic species as well. So there's the Arctic fox and lemmings are still present. So it's that transition from a very, very cold period and then warming up into this sort of interglacial warmer times. It's the end of that period.
So what is the context of the discovery of all of these remains in Gough's cave? Were there animal bones as well? And then coming across all of these human remains at the same time?
Yeah, well, Gough's cave's got quite a lengthy history to it. It's been studied, extensively studied, but it kind of, the story of the rediscovery, in modern era anyway, was in the 1890s, when a chap called Captain Richard Gough came along and found the cave, but he wasn't interested in the archaeology. He knew nothing about there being archaeology there at the time. He was actually interested in making it a show cave. So, yeah, like stalactites and stalagmites. And so he opened up the cave to show people because it was quite an attraction in the Victorian era. And then in the 1900s, they found Cheddar Man in the cave. That's when they knew that they were potentially human remains. And it wasn't until the 1920s, 50s, and then the late 80s that people actually went and did proper archaeological excavations of the cave. And it was when they were doing these later excavations near the mouth of the cave. And so there was a bit of undisturbed sediment. And when they excavated underneath there, that's when they found these huge amounts of human remains. It's highly fragmented though, so it could easily have been sort of like lost if you weren't looking for them or you weren't thinking what was of interest here. Because, yeah, they're so small, and it was about 200 of these human remains.
I mean, it is quite a story in itself.
Oh, gosh, yeah, no, it is. It's quite amazing, and the amount of material that they have from there.
So, Selina, it feels like those skull cups, they can steal the show, but why are these bones, why are they also so interesting?
50% of these bones show signs of post-mortem human modification.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can see things like cut marks, you can see scraping marks, but some are really special, like this one here. So this is the human forearm, the radius. And if I very carefully turn this over,
Very gentle.
yeah, we can see along the side there, you see that? There are these zigzag marks.
Oh, there's a white line.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this has been post-mortem modified by humans. It's got this artwork on the side.
No way. Brutal kind of cut marks into it, but also art.
Yeah. And with this one in particular, we can see even through the work that people have done, researchers have done, they can see that the bone would have been deflashed and then filleted. Then the same tool that they used to do the filleting was used to make that symbolic art upon it. You know, the bone was chewed and then it was also broken so that they could remove the nutrients from the bone, probably from the marrow and the grease. from within it as well.
So they do the cannibalism and then afterwards they come back and put some art on the bone itself.
It's kind of all part of the process, actually. It's more like a ritual process where it's all happening at the same time and together. So it's not separate. It just goes to show that these were actually really special to them. So this was more than just eating them.
The zigzag mark.
Yeah.
Is that a common artistic type that you see with these people as well?
So actually the Magdalenian people were pretty artistic. Yeah, we actually see quite a lot of different evidence of engravings on both tools and human remains and animal bones. We also see cave paintings, cave art, and figurines and modelling. These were a sophisticated group of people. And this is actually the oldest engraving on a human bone in the world. So it's very special.
So the cannibalism story is much more than just the skull cups. It's the legs, it's the arms, it's everything.
Exactly. And we think from the huge amount of bones that we had here, more than 50% of them show signs of human modification. So cut marks, so defleshing, so scraping, but also human tooth marks. So you can actually see some of the human tooth marks on here. Let me show you. I think this one of our leg bones here is a particularly good example. And if you look along here, you see these marks here?
Yep.
That's human tooth marks.
How can you tell? Because initially, I mean, I know it's not the zigzag, but it looks like the kind of a mark of a tool. How can you tell that actually that is left by a human tooth digging out of it?
So human teeth obviously is looking slightly different to animal teeth, and the way that it's moved and the way that the tooth moves, the shape of the tooth. And so these have actually been incredibly carefully looked at using really high-powered microscopes. So they can really look into the pressure, the way it would move, and you can see by the shape that exactly what animal would have created these. But yeah, you can actually tell that these are human teeth marks.
I must also ask about the mandibles. I mean, do we also see cut marks on this one too?
Oh, yes. Yeah, no. We see cut marks on all of the mandibles. Indeed, yeah. No, that's great. That's a good example there. So we can actually see, if you look around here, there are cut marks coming across here, around there.
Just see them.
Yeah.
You look at that.
Yeah. And we see these are very fine cut marks. And what we actually think is that, not to be too graphic, say okay, but that they probably removed like the fleshy parts, so things like the lips and the cheeks, and they would have removed the eyes. But this is a careful procedure.
I said it adds more gruesomeness to the story, but at the same time, more interest in the story as well.
Yeah, and also care. There's a lot of care that goes into this. This is not something that's done like quickly or brutally. This is something actually it's a whole process. Like it's a ritual.
I guess the next question is, why are they doing all of this cannibalistic eating of all of these remains?
Well, I mean, obviously there are all sorts of reasons for cannibalism. It might be for warfare, eating your enemy. It might be for hunger, or it can be for ritualistic behaviour. We don't think this is anything to do with like gastronomy or hunger, because alongside the human remains, there's lots of faunal remains at the site, and these are all signs of butchered as well in exactly the same way. So we know these people had access to food and nutrients in fauna. So it's unlikely that it's to do with them being hungry. And then when we see, like particularly with the skull cups, this kind of very careful way that this has been modified. And then we see the art. We see that there's carvings on there as well. When you start putting all these pieces together, it begins to kind of show that this is much more likely to do with a ritualistic behaviour and a form of funerary cannibalism. So something that they associate with something that you do after someone has died.
If that was the case, then these Ice Age humans weren't eaten to stave off starvation, but to celebrate their passing, to honour their memory. So do we know much about how people were living in Britain 15,000 years ago?
These people would have been hunter-gatherers. We know that they didn't live in Goth's Cave, for instance. that they would have been travelling around, they would have been sort of semi-permanent or semi-settled, we say. But they would have like seasonally followed the prey as where the prey moved. So this is things like horses, deer, reindeer. Their living patterns would have followed the patterns of their natural prey. And so places like Goth's Cove, we think is where they came back to seasonally. Maybe this is where the horses would come back to or the deer would come back to. And we know that they had butchery at the site. And we know, well, potentially they buried their people at the site.
So Selina, what past research has been done on these remains?
These remains have been incredibly well researched. I think it's probably more research has gone on to these Paleolithic remains than certainly any other in the UK.
Yeah, you know, when you get the word cannibalism into it, you can't help but get a lot of interest.
Oh, well, they're interesting in their own way, just from being from the Paleolithic, because there are actually so few human remains from the Paleolithic. So the research that's been done on them, a lot of research has gone into just looking at the remains, where they came from in the cave, about the time period, so the dating. But also, once researchers started to see there was this potential for the cut marks on them, then it's about trying to understand what those cut marks actually mean.
This is really, really cool to see all of this. But what is the current research ongoing with these remains?
I'm an ancient DNA researcher, so for me, this is where we're getting into the DNA aspect of it. And we are starting to try and get DNA from these bones. So we've begun the process and we've actually started to do some very carefully, I hasten to add, drill holes.
Drill holes?
Yeah. We actually drilled into some of these human remains very carefully. I don't think it's actually quite a small hole there, just a couple of millimetres.
Very neat.
Yeah, it's just there. And so we drill in very carefully into this hole to remove the bone powder, and then we extract the DNA from the bone powder. But obviously this is really old material, it gets harder, but this is what we're hoping to do, is to analyse the DNA from these people.
How many drill holes have you made? Have you done one from each of these to kind of get more of a sense of like the number and so on?
Not all of these, no. We very carefully have discussions with curators, because there's so many cut marks on these and there's so many like really interesting aspects to them. You have to be very careful where you put a drill hole so as not to get in the way of like the important other research that goes on in these samples. So we take a limited number, but obviously from the DNA then we might be able to see if we have 6 different genetic signatures. It's very difficult to tell how many people are in even this assemblage. But what we do know is we can assess the minimum number of individuals by looking at certain elements that can't be repeated. Probably 6 individuals or minimum number of individuals from the one child skull cup. We also know that there are 3 adults. Again, we have the skull cups, but also clavicles. And then we have 2 adolescents. So minimum number of 6, but of course we've got a lot of bones here, there's a lot of fragments. So we really need another form of analysis to work out how many other people were there, which is of course where ancient DNA can be a helpful tool.
Selina and her colleagues have already uncovered remarkable insights into the lives of these prehistoric people. But it's the DNA that might finally provide crucial missing pieces of this gruesome puzzle. Leading the critical next stage of the investigation is William Marsh. Hello, Will.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, thank you. You're another of the leaders on this project.
Indeed I am, yes.
So tell me about your role in this research.
Delina has, as we know, drilled the bones. So what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to extract the DNA from the bone powder, and from that to tell who these individuals were. First question probably is, how many individuals were at the site? Now we know there are 6 individuals at the site. We've got this from the archaeologists who identified skull cups and femurs from 3 adults, 2 adolescents and a child. But given the fact that there's over 200 remains at the site, we expect that there to be far more individuals. And we can do this quite easily with DNA analysis, which will not only tell us whether these individuals are related, but can also differentiate between different individuals at the site.
So your main expectation for this research, is it to find out how closely related these human remains were?
The Magdalene itself is a culture with which you see this cannibalism, this complexity of funerary behaviour, but we haven't actually found a direct link between the creation of the skull cups and the actual cannibalised bones. So although we've inferred that the cannibalism and the creation of the skull cups are linked, we actually have no sort of firm empirical basis for that. So one of the things we're also looking to do is to sequence DNA from the skull cup, sequence DNA from these cannibalized remains, to try to see whether all these bone elements were from the same individual, or if not, were related to one another, which again would indicate that this cannibalism is directly associated with the skull cup creation. Because as we know, they were cannibals. Were they cannibalizing within the group, between related individuals, or if these individuals were unrelated, perhaps this cannibalism isn't as symbolic and ritualistic as we first thought, and perhaps there might be a degree of conflict associated with it.
So is there still a gruesome possibility that the people living in Goth's Cave, they killed someone else and brought them into the cave and then just feasted on their flesh?
It is still possible, but there are a few reasons why we don't think that is indeed the case. The Magdalenian itself is a culture which is seen across Western Europe, and the indicative funerary behaviour is this cannibalism associated with the skull cups. Due to the complexity of the behaviour and due to the complexity of the artefacts actually found at the site, we believe that it's a ritual behaviour which is exclusive to this group, and the fact that it's in such high prevalence across sites throughout the whole of Europe indicates to us that it's actually a funerary behaviour and that there isn't any degree of warfare. A behaviour very similar to how the majority of people in England bury or cremate their dead. This is just a more gruesome version of that, I suppose.
Very much.
Yeah.
And talk to me about the whole process then. Once the DNA is extracted, how do you then go about learning this information? Is it with state-of-the-art technology?
So once we extract it, we have to multiply it because it's so heavily degraded. It's really, really short. If I take a finger prick of your blood and was to try to replicate it or extract the DNA from it, there would be millions and millions more times copies of DNA in your tiny little finger prick of blood compared to the DNA we're going to get out of the material. So we have to amplify it, and then we have to sequence it again millions and millions and millions of times. We're trying to read this DNA, this really, really short DNA, to give us enough of it, essentially, to tell who these individuals were related to and who they were similar to at the time across Europe.
Would it be possible to learn just how closely related they are? Would it be like father and son? Or
Yeah, it's incredible how far we've come in the last 25 years. Like if we generate enough data, we can quite clearly differentiate whether an individual is related to one another. So that's father, son, brothers, perhaps we have sister, aunts. We can tell that from DNA. And this has actually been something which has been really come to the forefront of ancient DNA research in the last 10 years. Ancient DNA has been around for the last sort of 40 years, but it's only really been in the last 10 years that the cost of actually sequencing this DNA has come down absolutely massively. That allows you to generate enough data to tell these distinct relationships apart.
And do you think, is there any expectation to learn more about these people, their ages and their genders as well, or what do we know?
So the ages is tricky. We would love to be able to tell the age of someone, but unfortunately we can't do it with DNA, but we definitely can do that with sex. So obviously XX chromosome for a female, XY chromosome for a male. We can differentiate between males and females fairly easily.
Well, it sounds very exciting. So I'm looking forward to coming back here. How many months do we think?
I reckon 6 to 9 months. Fingers crossed we should have some results for you. And I would absolutely love to share those with you.
Absolutely. I can't wait. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anna Cargill-Martin. I am an ancient historian and I am so excited to be here at the Petrie Museum of Egyptology. This was one of my favourite museums as a child, and today I've been given special access to some of the treasures of their collection. These artefacts that uncover the secrets of life and death in ancient Egypt, and I am so excited to see them up close. This is incredible. I am so excited to see this so close up because this is a garment that looks so modern. It's so well preserved. And yet, as I understand it, this is exceptionally old, even by the standards of ancient Egypt.
Absolutely. So this is the world's oldest known, most complete woven garment. So the garment has been radiocarbon dated around 5,000 years old. So this garment was ancient even when the Great Pyramid of Giza was being constructed.
So where is an object like this discovered?
So this garment was found as part of quite a large bundle of textiles, very muddy, apparently very smelly bundle of textiles, which was buried in a tomb in a grave at a site called Tarkhan in northern Egypt, not too far from the site of Giza. They would have been deliberately placed in the tomb, in this sort of bundle, and the beautiful sort of arid, dry environment inside the tomb means that the garment itself is incredibly well preserved today.
So this was found inside a tomb, but do we know whether it was also worn in life?
So there are hints on the garment itself that tell us that there's a very good chance that it was. So on the elbows of the garment, we see they're particularly creased.
Oh, yeah.
And also on the underarms and the armpits, there are stains. So these are hints to say that it may have been worn during life, but it was also found inside out. So someone had worn it, taken it off inside out, and then it was placed in the tomb.
That is so fascinating. And is there anything, either in the garment itself or in the kind of tomb context in which it was found, that gives us an insight into who might have owned this, who might have worn it?
So the material, the fabric that the garment is made from is linen, which was made from flax. Now, linen was relatively widespread in use at different periods in ancient Egypt, but there were grades of linen, qualities of linen. There were actually 4 different grades. And this is actually quite a fine type of linen. So we can tell just from the material that the person who would have owned this garment would have been quite high status. In terms of the size of the garment itself, this also gives us hints about the kind of person who might have worn it. So it is quite small.
Yeah.
Now, it's been described in the very distant past as being worn by a child, teenager, a young girl, but we don't know. We don't know exactly who would have worn a garment like this. It is very small. We tend to describe it having belonged to a slim teenager. But we must remember that in ancient Egypt, body sizes were different due to different nutrition from today. So people tended to be small.
I think it's so astounding, the detailing of the pleating up at the top of the garment. And I assume that's a purely aesthetic decision. This is a 5,000-year-old fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. So over the bodice and the sleeves, we can see these really detailed knife pleats. And so this was absolutely a conscious choice to create a level of detail in the garment itself. And there have been specialists that have analysed the construction technique of the garment. And what's wonderful is around the sort of V of the neck, there were whip stitches, and it's possible to know that these were made by someone who was right-handed. So the layers of, I guess, detective work that we can do to sort of investigate this garment and find the people behind the garment still continues today.
And do we know anything about how this garment would have been worn? Are there any other sort of elements of dress that survive from this period?
So after this, it was still very, very common for hundreds, thousands of years for these sort of linen garments to have been worn, different lengths, different shapes, sizes, kilts. Linen is it could be made in a very sort of fine, producing very thin fabric, which would have been quite sort of diaphanous in the heat. So actually that would have worked incredibly well in a very hot climate. And we see representations of different types of garments on tomb walls, for example, people wearing these beautiful pleated linen garments.
So this style that is popular about 5,000 years ago remains popular for some time after that?
Yeah, absolutely. In different periods, the pleats become smoother or they become more exaggerated. So about 1,500 years later, the fashion was for really sort of diaphanous pleated garments, which you'd almost see on a catwalk today. And that technique of pleating only became more skilled, more specialized in time.
So this is the kind of beginning of that fashion that is so iconic from the Egyptian wall paintings.
Yeah, absolutely. And bearing in mind this is 5,000 years ago, the person who created these pleats was incredibly skilled.
Yeah.
The people that created this beautiful fine linen, again, incredibly skilled themselves.
And so the garment, as it survives now, looks almost like a top. Do we know how long it would originally have been?
Invariably, it's described as a tunic or a dress. I mean, these are very sort of modern words to describe such a garment. The lower hem is actually lost, so it could have been longer, similar to a sort of a Galloway type garment that you might find worn in Egypt today, commonly. Equally, it might have been quite short and actually have been a sort of tunic type garment. We don't know.
What an item to start with. I'm so excited to see where we're going next. So tell me what this incredible object is.
So this is a 5,000-year-old gaming board.
Oh my God.
It's wonderful. It is known as a Meroë board. So Meroë was a snake god who protected the sun god on the journey to the afterlife. So snakes were revered in ancient Egypt in many different ways. The body of the snake lent itself so beautifully to this game. Ultimately, in this game, you would move from the tail of the snake inwards around the spiral into the head of the snake.
So the entire board is designed like a kind of coiled serpent, and you start with the tail here and you go all the way around to the head with that wonderful little tongue in the center. And is the cross-hatching here, is this meant to kind of delineate scales?
I think so. The ancient Egyptians really observed nature, animals, plants. And so for me, this is no accident to show the cross-hatching to indicate the very detailed scales of the snake. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the little eyes. And is that even a kind of forked tongue?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. So we don't know exactly how the game would have been played, but it's very likely that there would have been gaming pieces of some type, so small pebbles, perhaps something carved into a particular shape. And then you would have moved around the board as you were playing the game to be able to reach that head of the snake.
And do we have any idea what governed your movement around the board? Was this a dice game? Was there something else involved?
So we know from ancient Egypt at different times they did use dice, but what was more common were dice sticks. So you might have a set of 4 sticks of different colours that you would throw, and then that would indicate a number, which then would help you move along the board.
So do we know if this was a popular game? Was this something everyone was playing?
So we know that it was quite popular in the very early periods of ancient Egyptian history. So this dates from what we call the pre-dynastic period, so the very earliest time when Upper and Lower Egypt joined together, unified to become ancient Egypt as we know it today. But really, depictions of this game, Meroë, only lasted for a few hundred years, up until around the time of the Giza pyramids. So, I mean, it's still 700-800 years, but this game didn't actually continue in use then throughout ancient Egyptian history. So maybe it was a trend of some kind, over a certain amount of time.
Yeah. And then suddenly the kids were like, man, that's not cool anymore. So we have the gaming boards. Do we have any depictions of these in use?
We do. So in particular from tombs, from elite tombs, around the time of, again, the Great Pyramid of Giza, around 2500 BC, on the tomb walls, we have depictions not only of Meroë and the game being played, but of different types of games, such as Senet, which is quite a well-known game from ancient Egypt. And it's really interesting to see people depicted with the gaming pieces playing these games.
And how many people are usually depicted playing it? Is this like a 2-person game, or could there be more players involved?
So for Meroë, we don't know exactly. It's often the gaming boards which are shown in the tomb. But for a game like Senet, it's kind of the same. You move around a sort of rectangular board. There are depictions of 1 person playing, 2 people playing. So we don't know for sure, but it makes sense to me that this would be at least 2 people, possibly more.
And this is clearly a beautifully made object, and it's What sort of stone is this?
So this is limestone. So limestone would have been very easily available in Egypt. And the thing with this board game is actually it's very heavy. It's not light. It's not a portable board game as you would know it today. So to make the gaming board out of stone is quite interesting in itself. So perhaps it wasn't intended to travel.
And so do we think that this was a game that was being played kind of up and down the social spectrum, or given that the board is so heavy, it's so beautifully carved, and we're seeing depictions of it in elite tombs, do you think that this is a sort of leisure activity of the elite?
So the jury's still out when it comes to, in particular, when it comes to gaming in ancient Egypt. So we know that some games, it's very likely they would have been played during life. But also with particular games such as Mehen, such as the game Senet, there were also real implications around sort of divine entities linked with the afterlife. And so if you depicted a gaming board, or you had the gaming board itself in the tomb, there may also have been sort of ritual elements there linking the use of the gaming board with your journey into the afterlife.
Hi there, I'm Dan Snow, and if you love history, you know that History Hit is on a mission to bring the past to life. Every week, we travel the world to film original and in-depth documentaries. And now History Hit has launched a YouTube membership to give you access to even more films released weekly. Become a History Hit channel member now to make sure you never miss out on exclusive documentaries on topics like newly discovered shipwrecks and the clash of gladiators. We cover all time periods and all subjects, from Pompeii to D-Day. Click the join button on the History Hit YouTube channel, or click the link in the description and see for yourself what History Hit has to offer. We can't wait to have you join the team.
So what am I looking at here?
So these are two objects which tell the story about work and labour in ancient Egypt. So they're about 1,000 years apart in age. So one of them is an object we call an ostrakon. So this is a reused piece of pottery, broken pottery, that has been used essentially like an ancient sticky note. So a note has been added onto the outside actually of the ostrakon here, which tells us a story about what it was really like to work in ancient Egypt.
Wonderful. Gloves on for this, I
Yes,
assume.
please. Yes, please.
This is just a broken shard of pottery, absolutely covered in writing. Can you tell me when this was written, and do we know what it says?
Yeah, so this is around 3,000 years old, and the writing on there is called hieratic. So this is sort of like shorthand for ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. So this could be written quite quickly. This is actually an administrative note from the workers who were working in to build the royal tomb of King Ramesses III. And this is a list of all of the yarn that was sent to them to make lamp wicks so that they were able to do their work. Because working in the tomb, it would be very dark. They would need wicks to be able to have light to be able to do that work. So this is kind of like an ancient delivery list on a very ancient sticky note.
So this, I assume, is not for sort of official record purposes. Is this someone who is working on the tomb and is trying to kind of keep track of things as he goes? Or is this a kind of accepted means of communication?
That's a great question. So if you can imagine that this is a broken piece of pottery, so somebody just picked this up from the ground and thought, okay, this is perfect for recycling. I'm going to reuse this. So this was seen by the ancient Egyptian people as something they could use quickly and then dispose of quickly, like our sticky notes today. I mean, nowadays in Egypt, in certain places, you can still see broken pottery all over the floor, but also broken pieces of stone. So this is from the ancient site of Thebes, which is now modern Luxor in southern Egypt. And the site is very well known also for this beautiful white limestone. So we have lots of notes on broken pieces of pottery from Luxor and also on this beautiful white limestone, which was just perfect for writing. So this was probably written by a relatively high official, because you would need to be they would need to be literate. So they would need to be a relatively high official to have noted this. There are debates over the level of literacy in ancient Egypt, and the debate ranges anywhere from 1% to 5% of the population as a whole. The majority of them would be reading and writing hieratic because even fewer people could read and write hieroglyphs as we know them today. So, yeah, very, very small percentage of the population who would have had access to education to be able to become literate.
You said this was around 1,000 years later.
Exactly, yes, exactly. So this is different materials. So here we're looking at papyrus. So papyrus is ancient Egyptian paper made from the papyrus plant, which was grown by the banks of the Nile in Egypt. This is actually written in Greek, and it's very interesting because it involves a complaint in the workplace.
So what is the complaint? What has happened?
So it seems that there's a cultivator, a farmer, whose female donkey and her load have been taken.
No.
And as you can understand, they weren't very happy about this. And so this note is that individual informing a policeman, essentially, that their donkey was taken, as well as the associated goods, and sort of putting that in writing. And it being papyrus, it's a material that wouldn't have been so easily available. So this would have had to have been manufactured and produced. And so this is potentially something that would have been kept in a more formal sense.
So this is a sort of official crime report.
Exactly.
And do we know if it would have been written by the farmer himself, or would this likely have been written by a scribe?
So we don't know for sure, but it would make a lot of sense that it was noted by a scribe, someone who was literate, who was able to sort of make a formal note of this complaint and the fact that this action had happened.
And when you say it was a complaint that was kind of made to a policeman, what do we know about the Egyptian police force? What do we know about what they might have done in response to a complaint like this?
The police, as we describe them in ancient Egypt, I suppose the nature of the police differed in different periods.
Yeah.
And so it could be that there was at different periods, there was a sort of local overseeing group that was perhaps more informal, that kept sort of order within a village or a town. But we also know that there was a formal process of policing certain sites. There's also some debate over whether mercenaries were brought into Egypt from the sort of desert areas around Egypt in order to act as policemen. There is some evidence for this too.
And the fact that this is, the fact that this is written in Greek as opposed to hieratic, is that by this point the official language of Egypt? And is it what people are kind of speaking day to day? Or is this just the language that they're using to make official kind of complaints and documents like this?
So at this time in Egypt, so this is around 250 BC. So this is a time we know as the Ptolemaic period. So this is when the Greeks ruled over Egypt. And so the Greek script would absolutely have been the formal script that was used. Greek would have been spoken. But also it's important to bear in mind that at this time in Egypt, the country was very much a melting pot of people, ideas, languages, objects, traveling around the Mediterranean into outside of Egypt and beyond. And so this particular period was really fascinating in terms of identity. What did it mean to be Egyptian at this time in Egypt?
I wonder if he got his donkey back.
You've got to hope so.
So this is incredible. These look so recognizably modern. But when were these made?
I absolutely agree. It's almost like you could go down to a shop and buy these sorts of things today.
A sort of like boho beach shop would give you these woven sandals in an instant.
Exactly. But they're so incredibly ancient. So this beautiful little sandal is around 3,500 years old. And then these socks are just under 2,000 years old. So imagine that between them, there is still 1,500 years.
What sort of context were these discovered in?
These objects were actually found from a domestic context, so from a town or a village, which is quite surprising in itself. But the arid environment would have helped to support the preservation of these very, very delicate materials.
So these are not things that are being made for the grave. These are things that are being worn in everyday life. And do we know anything about the sort of people that would have been wearing these? This looks quite small.
Yeah, this is a very, very small sandal, which we think was probably worn by a child, possibly, according to modern sizes, possibly a child of around 8 years old. But of course, it is tricky to compare modern sizes with ancient foot sizes, but around about 8 years old. So this is a child who would have lived at a site called Tel El Amarna, which is in Middle Egypt. And they would have lived about 3,500 years ago. And so we don't know who this child was. We don't have their name. We don't even have the other sandal. But in some ways, I think that's very special because it opens up some questions about who that child was and what they did. It's possible that this child may even have been a worker themselves. They may have worked on some element of constructing the ancient city. This was very common in ancient Egypt for children to work in this way. But again, we don't know, unfortunately. But it means that, again, we can tell stories about who this child might have been.
So we know child labour was something that was common in Egypt. Do we know what sort of roles they were doing? Are they doing kind of the same jobs that the adults are doing, or are there specific roles made for children?
So there would have been roles that children would have been very good at because of the size of their hands. So if you have very small hands, you can do very delicate work. So things like, I don't know, helping to shape pottery, for example, if you have very small hands, that would have been quite useful. Much like the Victorian children in the mills, whose small hands were useful to delve into the machines. So there were jobs that would have been best suited for children with smaller hands. However, we do also know that children were engaged in heavy labour, different periods and different areas of ancient Egypt. And we know that from the condition of their human remains, ultimately from their graves. So it is evident, including at the site of Tel El Amarna, that children were engaged in heavy labour.
And this would have been a sort of everyday sandal for a child. This is the normal thing that workers are wearing.
So, that's a great question. So this would have been made from reeds. So again, reeds very easily accessible at the banks of the Nile. But we do know that children more commonly were barefoot.
Really?
So this also raises an interesting question. So if the child wearing this sandal wasn't barefoot, does that imply some level of status? Again, we don't know for sure. It opens up certain questions.
I love the fact that we only have one. I wonder if this kind of 8-year-old just lost his other sandal. Got a real bollocking when he got home.
Well, I'd kind of like to think that the sandal is still somewhere in the sand at Amarna, and it'll be found one day.
And here, am I right in thinking that I'm looking at socks made specifically for wearing with sandals?
Absolutely. So you might be able to see that the toes are indicated in the socks. And so much like the socks you might see today in Japan, for example, that are created specifically to be worn with sandals, these socks would have been ideal to have been worn with sandals in an ancient fashion moment.
Dubious then, as it is now. And it would have been worn with exactly this style of sandals.
Exactly. So this sort of flip-flop style of sandal would have been perfect with these socks. And it would have meant that the wearer would have had, perhaps if it was cold, that they could have worn their socks and stayed warm whilst also having appropriate footwear.
And so in the winter, would people have been wearing socks with sandals rather than closed shoes?
So it depended on the period. And again, it did depend potentially on your status as well. So these socks were created from brown wool, and they were made with a technique which we call nowadays nail binding, which is a sort of single needle knitting technique. And again, there is certainly a level of skill involved in that. So whether that then equates to a higher status, or perhaps, not everybody had access to socks that looked like this, that were created in this way, remains an important question.
And these are created much later than this sandal.
Yes, absolutely. So there's there's just over 1,500 years between these two pieces of footwear. So again, you know, fashions don't change all that much. As you said, you could go, I don't know, down Oxford Street today and probably see something quite similar in some of the shops. There was a level of fashion as well as function at different periods. And I do think that these two different types of footwear do exemplify that.
I am so excited to be seeing these so close up. They are just such astounding works of art. Can you tell me a little bit more about them?
So these are painted wooden panels, essentially, that show the faces and the upper body of individuals, men, women, and children. And these panels would have been used to cover the face of the deceased person, who would have then been mummified, ready for their grave, ready for the afterlife.
And what period and what area of Egypt do these come from?
So these date to the Roman period. So this is about 2,000 years ago. And this is when Egypt was part of the Roman Empire. And if we look carefully at some of the features that you can see on some of these painted panels, they really tell a story about Roman style dress, Roman hairstyles, jewelry. So these are from a site called Hawara, which is in the Fayum region of Egypt, which is the northwest of Egypt. And this was a very important, very strategic site in the Roman period, where there would be, again, people, lots of trade of items and ideas sort of flowing into and out of Egypt.
And it's so interesting because these are much more sort of realistic and representative than a lot of the mummy masks that we're familiar with from earlier periods of Egyptian history. What do you think that tells us about Egyptian culture under the Roman Empire?
These represent a real, what I would like to call a cultural entanglement, a real melting pot of traditions coming together. So you're absolutely right that when we think about a mummy mask, even at this time as well, you think of a sort of gold gilded, something very ostentatious in its way, but these are something completely different. And it's very clear that the people that produced these were, you know, they're incredibly skilled artists, and they were really concentrated at this particular period, at this particular place. And so, again, it tells us something about burial customs as well. Very Roman-style painted panel portraits, but the body was mummified in a very Egyptian style. So then it opens the question, you know, around Egyptian identity. What did it mean to be Egyptian in the Roman period?
So was this style of mummy portrait and kind of type of burial very specific to this area? Or was this something that we think was probably quite diffuse throughout Roman Egypt?
So as far as we know, it was relatively concentrated. So at this site of Hawara, we have hundreds of examples of these panels found in graves, and they represent, you know, men, women, and children. And really, they are quite specific to this site and this area.
I think it's so fascinating how individualized these portraits are. They are so representative. They're so realistic. You have such a sense of what this individual looked like, even a sort of sense of what their character might have been like. And what do you think that says about how the people of this place, of this time, wanted to be remembered as they moved into the afterlife?
So I like to describe these type of portraits, painted panels, as ancient photoshopping. Because if you're going into the afterlife, if this is your eternal image going into the afterlife, you want to look your best. And so, okay, they didn't have Photoshop as we know it today, but or like an ancient kind of, filter. You wanted to be seen in your best clothes, with your best hairstyle, the best jewelry, that your skin was perfect, that there was a level of sort of perfection there that may not have existed in real life. We don't know if these particular individuals owned this jewelry or wore their hair in this way. But I think that opens up these really interesting questions around authenticity in a way. Like, what are we looking at here? Are these mirror images? Are these portraits as we would describe them today? Or are they sort of general representations of individuals that have been filtered essentially 2,000 years ago?
So these are such beautifully made objects, and they're absolutely packed with symbols of wealth. What can we say about the status of the people that are depicted?
So we can look at the individuals themselves who are shown on the objects. So they are wearing, very, very nice, expensive jewelry. They've got their hair in beautiful hairstyles, lovely clothes. So just looking at the individuals, we can infer that they were of a relatively high status. But looking at the objects themselves, the technique of producing, of painting these panels was highly skilled. And the wood that would have been used to make them was also very, very high quality. It would have had to have been collected specifically for this purpose. So from the objects themselves, we can also tell that they would have been relatively high status individuals who owned these.
So this is something that is only accessible to the elites?
Absolutely.
And do we know what sort of status the artists who made these would have possessed? Would there have been people that were acknowledged as sort of great masters, or were they always seen as skilled artisans?
Based on the evidence that we have, we don't know of, particular individuals like you might see with the great Greek vase painters, for example.
Or the great Greek panel painters as well.
Indeed, absolutely. But what I think is quite interesting to think about is that perhaps the artists who created these objects, were they originally trained in Rome, for example, and then they traveled to Egypt? I don't know. Were they born in Egypt? Would they class themselves as Egyptian? It's a really, really very interesting, quite complex question. And again, just ties back to that idea of identity. What did it mean to be Egyptian in the Roman period? And also, how did you want to present yourself? These people wanted to present themselves in a very Roman fashion. So did it take a Roman artist to be able to do this? We don't know.
From the dress to here, we have covered an incredible length of time.
Absolutely. So over 3,000 years of history, of ancient Egyptian history, showing us how people lived and how they died thousands of years ago.
Yeah. And I think it's incredible that we saw in that dress this concern with how you presented yourself. And we're seeing that again 3,000 years later when people are making their decisions about how they want to be presented in their final form as they face death.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that point, the final form. So, when you've made your decision, this is very, very important because this is how you're going to be remembered.
And this is an Egypt that has changed immeasurably. And we see that in the style and in the Roman elements in these portraits. But it is also an Egypt that has a lot of continuity. And that's reflected in the fact that these are attached to mummies.
Yeah, absolutely. So mummified individuals, very Egyptian style of burial, but very, very Roman style of these painted portraits, which would have covered the face. So again, that idea of kind of cultural entanglement, melting pot of Egypt, of ideas, people, things, traveling around to really create these beautiful objects that we're seeing today.
What an incredible reflection on the length and the depth of Egyptian civilization. I cannot thank you enough for showing me these incredible objects, for letting me get so close to them, for talking me through them. And the Petrie Museum is open to the public, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tuesday till Friday, 1 till 5 p.m, and then on Saturdays from 11 till 5 p.m. It's been a pleasure to have you here, and I look forward to seeing many people who are watching today at the museum soon.
I look forward to coming back.
You'd be so welcome.
In December 2021, a metal detectorist made the archaeological discovery of a lifetime in a field on the outskirts of Melsonby in Yorkshire. The largest hoard of Iron Age treasure ever found in Britain, filled with a variety of objects to do with chariots, horses, feasting and fighting. This chance discovery is reshaping what archaeologists thought about the Iron Age in the north of England more than 2,000 years ago, before the Romans arrived. An area of ancient Britain often overshadowed by the south. But the future of this hoard is under threat. I've been invited to Durham University to see these stunning artefacts and to learn more about its story. To show me the extent of the discovery, I'm meeting an old friend, Professor Tom Moore. Tom, it is such a privilege to be here, an amazing discovery. What types of objects have we got in front of us here?
So what you're looking at is just a fraction of the over 900 items.
900?
Yeah, huge, one of the, if not the largest hoard of Iron Age metalwork in Britain, including various bits of horse harness, turrets, so these are the rein rings which go on the chariots, control the horses through the reins going through here. These are bridle bits. So these are going in the mouth of the horse. You can see that's the bit that actually goes in the horse's mouth there. And then on the other side, what we're looking at is various bits of the chariots or wagons, as we think some of them might be. You've got linchpins and they hold the axle on the vehicle. So as I say, this is just a fraction of that material. We've got enough horse harness here for 14 ponies at least.
That's not actually to a chariot, is it?
No, that's a cauldron. It's actually found the other way, upturned, and you can see the bottom has been smashed in. So that's a cauldron. So that makes an interesting combination, and that might tell us something about what the event is that leads to this deposition.
And can you tell me a bit about the context of this discovery? Where was it found?
So the location of Melsonby was discovered is very close to Stanwick. Stanwick's a late Iron Age power centre, sometimes referred to as a royal centre. So this is one of the most important sites in the north of Britain in the late Iron Age. And it's probably the major power centre for a people that we know of as the Brigantes,
right, yeah.
Who are referred to by Roman historians. They're probably a confederacy of people. These were deposited in 2 ditches of enclosures outside. So there's some event is going on related to Stanwick, probably dates to really the heyday of Stanwick. Probably just before the Roman conquest,
right.
The very end of the 1st century BC, early 1st century AD.
So we've got late Iron Age Britain, just before the Roman conquest. We've got the Brigantes, and we've got northern Britain. The name that just screams out to me is Cartimandua. Can you tell us a bit about who she is?
Yes, so Queen Cartimandua was queen of the Brigantes. We know about her because of the Roman historian Tacitus. She was probably sort of active around the mid-1st century AD through to about the AD 70s or more or less. She was certainly an important individual who was queen of the Brigantes people, Tacitus tells us, an ally of Rome. More importantly, what we can take from that story is that she's an incredibly powerful ruler. Our current dating evidence suggests that this is probably deposited earlier in the 1st century AD. So before that she's the ruler of the Brigantes, so that it may not be related to her directly. We now know from the British Iron Age there are important rulers, and significantly important female rulers were probably quite common. So in a sense, that's quite exciting to think that actually this event might be related to another powerful female ruler.
Exactly, because sometimes you might be mistaken for initially coming to the presumption that all of this would have belonged once to a very powerful man. But as you say, with all of this information coming to light, Cartimandua, Boudica, that all those names, you know that there were powerful women in Iron Age societies.
Actually, Tacitus mentions this, that she owes her status to her birth, and that actually increasingly we understand that that is through the female line. It's quite likely it's a female ruler.
Okay, the next big question. Why do we think this great hoard of over 900 items was buried some 2,000 years ago in what is now a Yorkshire field?
Okay. In many ways, that's one of the most difficult questions to answer. So both the deposits were laid down in ditches of enclosures. What we have is bits of vehicles, things with horse harness. We have things like the cauldron, so we have feasting equipment, but we don't have things like personal adornment. We don't have brooches. What that means is people are choosing what goes in those deposits. What this is perhaps is depositing for symbolic reasons. That's also indicated by the fact that a lot of the material is broken up deliberately. When we look at the tyres, you can see the fact that they've been bent out of shape. If you look at the cauldron, the base of that is smashed in.
Yes.
So imagine when there was a boulder in the base of that where they've used to smash the base of the cauldron. What looks like they've been doing is throwing boulders on the deposit as it went in. Part of this is kind of ritually putting this stuff out of use. So we think this is more of a symbolic deposit. What sets this apart is that there is no burial.
There's no human remains.
There are no human remains at all. One possibility is, of course, that the body is buried somewhere else, and that these are the things that were being given as offerings to that individual. They're deposited around the burial site.
The attention to detail, even in these small little parts, I mean, it is extraordinary.
The amount of decoration on the metalwork from Melsonby is incredible. It's worth remembering that these things look green now, but they are copper alloy, so they would have been bronze coloured originally. And what you're looking at on an object like this, and many of the objects, is coral.
So that's coral, is it?
Coral
Right.
from the Mediterranean.
Wow.
It would have been a pinky red colour originally. It's turned white over time. And some of the objects also have bits of glass, blue glass on it, or yellow enamel. Because the Brigantes are spread out across Yorkshire and County Durham, what we call them today, you're maybe looking at people bringing stuff from across those groups of people. So this is not all owned by one individual, perhaps. It may be different individuals who are bringing their material, their best stuff, as an offering in honour of some individual. And it is worth saying, this stuff is the best.
Okay, so is it not Melsonby Hoard? Is it Melsonby Hoards? There was more than one deposit?
That's a good question. Actually, it's worth remembering that the metal detectorist had 2 signals, so we opened up 2 trenches to excavate the 2 deposits that he found. So actually we have 2 hoards. Wow. This is from what we call Hoard 1, from the first trench we opened. But there's a second deposit, which is more of a block. That is also huge, though, over 88 items within that hoard itself. So we actually have 2 deposits.
Over 900 objects. Is this the biggest Iron Age hoard ever discovered in Britain?
It's certainly probably the largest. Just the amount of material. There are some other deposits of metalwork, but not as large as Melsonby. One of the interesting things about Melsonby, so from this material, from Hoard 1, the material from Hoard 2, and some finds from the 19th century, are all contemporary. So this is all related to a single event or events that are closely related.
So you've got objects related to horses here, chariots over there, but that's, Tom, I've never seen anything like that before. So that's part of the vehicle itself?
So this is part of the vehicles, yeah. These are the tyres from the vehicles. So these are the iron tyres around the wooden wheel. All the wooden bits of the wheel have gone, probably been burnt out or broken out before they were deposited. So they're twisted out of shape. So they've been deliberately bent out of shape. And that's, we think, probably a kind of ritual process of putting these things out of use. But the iron in them is incredibly well preserved. The size and thickness of some of these wheels suggest that we've got potentially 4-wheeled wagons as well. We have 4-wheeled wagons in continental Europe in the Iron Age, but we don't have them in Britain. So that's really exciting for us that we've got a whole new type of vehicle that we've never seen before.
So is this discovery, I mean, has it reshaped what archaeologists think about Iron Age Britain?
In many ways, it has. We always have understood that there are powerful elites in southern Britain in the late 1st century BC and early 1st century AD. We'd had hints from the excavations at Stannick that there are individuals like Queen Cartamandua in northern Britain at that time. What Melsonby does is really demonstrate that those communities, those individuals, were of the same status, the same wealth, the same connections to get material as those in southern Britain, because of the quantity of material that's buried at Melsonby. And it really emphasises that they're just as important, just as powerful in central Britain in the late Iron Age as those communities in the south.
It shows that it's not all about the south. As Tom mentioned, there was also a second, very different deposit discovered. It's called the Block, and it is filled with even more stunning Iron Age treasures. This unique find has proven an exciting challenge for conservator Dr. Emily Williams. So Emily, this is the legendary, this is the famous The Block. Part of the Melsonby hoard, but also quite different as well. So can you first of all tell us about the context of its discovery?
So the block was also discovered by the same metal detectorist, but it's slightly separate from the Trench 1 material. We know that it's been treated slightly differently from the material in Trench 1. The material in Trench 1 shows signs of having been heated. What would have been the bottom of the block is now the top of the block, but there's a layer of spears lying over here that would have been put down first, and then this pile of artifacts would have been placed on them, and we believe wrapped up and then buried.
Can we be certain that this block is directly linked to the rest of the artifacts uncovered in the Melsonby hoard?
So we have many of the same sorts of objects that we have from Trench 1. We have a lot of horse and wagon, chariot sort of related material. There are also spears. There's several across the top. There's a very well preserved one.
Oh, wow.
There.
That leaf-shaped spear tip right there, that's extraordinary.
Yes. There's what we believe is a spear inside, holding two copper alloy objects together. They've both been threaded onto it.
That shaft looks, I can see that there. It's one of those beautiful glimpses into the interior of the block, isn't it? But that shaft of metal, of iron, it looks thinner. It looks like a thinner shaft, very different to that spearhead we've got there.
The thought is it could be a Roman pilum.
A Roman spear, wow, okay, potentially that's interesting. So an actual Roman artifact within the block. And how do we think this was deposited in the ground? So do we think it was just all bundled together? Wrapped up so in some sort of organic material, do we think?
Yes, probably textile, because we do have some remnants of textile preserved here and here.
Oh, is it that whitish material that you have amongst the artifacts?
It is, yes. And so it's preserved on the copper alloy objects because copper alloy is slightly toxic as it corrodes, so microorganisms are less likely to eat the organic material.
Seeing something like this is not what you would expect.
It isn't. It is definitely the biggest block lift I've ever worked on. Clearly the first thing was to sort of understand how to orient ourselves and to get into it safely without doing a lot of damage.
What sorts of tools did you have to use to get rid of some of the excess soil?
Archaeologists are used to working with trowels. Trowel didn't really work very well. Conservators are used to working with scalpels, but that wasn't a very good excavation technique. And then I started thinking about tools that paleontologists use to excavate out dinosaur bones. We started to try that, and that worked like a dream, and was very effective at helping us to get through some of this iron pan and iron concretion on the surface.
How long have you been working on this particular block?
So just in terms of excavating it, it's been about 250 to 300 hours.
Wow, that's a lot of time with the block.
It is. It's been very slow, painstaking work to make sure that I didn't remove too much, trying to figure out where artifacts were.
And have you been able to figure out what is right at the center of this block? Because I can see quite a few things with the naked eye, but not everything.
Before we even began to excavate, we took the block to Southampton to the MUVIS facility there, and they were able to CT scan it for us. And that CT scan showed us that there were a lot of the same kinds of objects that we already knew from Trench 1. So we have nave bands, we have lynch pins, we have a large number of copper tubes, but once we were able to uncover them, we could see that they're quite similar to some copper tubes that we also find in Trench 1.
Is there any plans to, when conserving this, to try and take it apart? Or are you going to try and keep the block as it is?
Our hope is to keep it as it is. It tells such a great story of discovery.
It rewards, the more you look at it, the more you can see. It's brilliant.
It does, and there's lots of hidden details. There's a little face down here.
Is there? Wow.
There's a little boar's head as well. Plus, in order to take it apart, we'd have to start making decisions about what had meaning and what didn't. So to get to anything inside, we'd have to decide that those spears aren't important to us and that we're just going to blast through them because they're so corroded. One of the reasons that we stopped where we are is that at this point, most of what you see is either concretion attached to an object or it's a little brace for an object. And if we remove some of this, then the concern is, will things start to collapse?
It's really interesting to see what people will find out from this block in the future, just from this form.
Yes, and also, you know, the ability to look at the CT scans in greater detail, to parse them more, to potentially even scan it using different techniques in the future. All of those things remain possibilities.
Emily, it is so incredible to see this. I've never seen an archaeological object like this in my life, but it's quickly become one of my favorites, the block. Thank you so much for showing me.
Oh, no problem.
Excavating the entire Melsonby hoard was a massive task. But fortunately, help was at hand from the team at Historic England.
Historic England have an interest in things that are nationally important, and this hoard is unquestionably nationally important.
So how far along in the story of the Melsonby hoard did you get involved?
Quite early on, I'd been working with Tom for some time. During the course of his field work, he was approached by the metal detectorist who said that he had actually found something that was kind of more than he had expected. Tom went over to have a look and was able to establish that yes, this really was a hugely significant find. And by the end of the day, we had been able to establish that it was something that was nationally important and something that we could help to fund.
And so how does it then go on to doing an excavation? Because I'm guessing early on, just be quite secretive with it all.
Yes, I mean, there are a lot of things to consider. It also had to be done quite quickly because it wasn't far from a public footpath. So, we had to make sure that it was done kind of sensitively, done to the highest possible standards with a huge amount of kind of digital information recorded. So there's all sorts of things, can eventually become available to the public.
And how unusual is this discovery for the north of England?
It is spectacular and unusual for the north of England. And that's because most of the archaeological work takes place in the south. So what we know of the Iron Age has been largely determined by excavations and discoveries in the south of England. More and more is being found as people kind of shift their focus from the south to the north.
I know you've been involved in lots of archaeological discoveries in your time at Historic England. Would you say that this rests amongst one of the most exciting, one of the most important for you?
I think this is still head and shoulders above all the other things that I've been involved with, because the research potential for this is spectacular. So it's a game changer. Yeah, that's why this is so different.
But the fate of the Melsonby hoard is hanging in the balance. I've come to the Yorkshire Museum, where a team of curators, including Emily North, are hoping to change that.
So Emily, we've got another small bit of the Melsonby hoard here at the Yorkshire Museum.
Yes, we were really lucky in that we were able to borrow 1% of the total hoard and put it on display for the first time ever. The response has been really positive. People have come from all over the place. They've loved seeing it, and the generosity of the public in helping us fundraise for this amazing hoard has been incredible.
And so what is your aim for the Melsonby hoard?
What we would absolutely love, and what we're trying really hard to do, is fundraise enough initially to acquire the hoard into our collection, owned by the people of York and Yorkshire and the people of Britain forever. So there's sort of two parts of conservation. The first part is stabilising it, and if they're not stabilised, these objects could continue to deteriorate, could get more and more fragile. And so what we need to do is we need to get expert conservators to halt that decay in its tracks. So the second part of our fundraising is to really keep these objects safe into the distant future.
And let's not forget the almighty block as well. I mean, the opportunities, the potential for that's huge at the Yorkshire Museum.
Yes, so the block is curatorially a real challenge because it's such a fantastic group of objects all stuck together. We don't quite know I don't know what's going on in the middle of that block in terms of those agents of decay and that deterioration. So what we don't want is for it to be deteriorating from the inside out.
You've highlighted how important it is to get this hoard, to keep it together and to keep it in a place like the Yorkshire Museum. Can you tell us a bit about the deadline that you have for fundraising?
The deadline for that first phase of funding to acquire the hoard, that's at the end of July. So that's very, very soon.
I mean, has there been a very strong reaction from the general public?
Absolutely. We have seen an uptick in our visitor numbers, which is brilliant, and we always welcome that.
1% as well?
Only 1%, yeah.
And I don't want to bring too much doom and gloom, but if that fundraising total is not reached, what could potentially happen to this hoard?
It's a treasure case, so currently it belongs to the Crown, but if we're not able to raise that amount, the Crown would disclaim their interest in it. I think it's very unlikely that it would all stay together. I think what's much more likely to happen is that individual pieces and parts of it would be sold to different private collectors. This is our last chance, really, in the next month or so to try and keep this here forever. Legally, it's treasure, but it's a real treasure in terms of the secrets that it holds, and we're only at the very, very beginning of starting to understand what it means, what it tells us.
Is there quite a big hope, dare I say expectation, that this hoard will inspire future generations about Iron Age Britain, particularly in northern Britain?
The story of this hoard really captures the imagination. We want children and young people to really get the bug of history and archaeology from seeing such an incredible and mysterious hoard come to light within their lifetimes.
With more than 900 extraordinary, pretty diverse objects as well, I can only imagine the amount of books, chapters, academic papers, podcasts that will be emerging about the Melsonby hoard over the next few years, and indeed deep into the future. I wish you all the best, and it's wonderful to be here.
Thank you.
I've been blown away by the Melsonby hoard and how it is reshaping our understanding of Iron Age Britain here in the north, in Yorkshire. And I really do hope that the Yorkshire Museum can acquire it to keep it in northern Britain for future research as well, and so that all the hoard is kept together for people to come and see in a public space. Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
So I'm back here at the British Museum, one of my favourite places in London. And I'm here because, well, Gladiator 2, it's hit the cinemas. Ancient Rome is back in the Hollywood spotlight. And I've been invited here to have a look at some very special Roman artefacts, all to do with the gladiators. I don't know what they are, but I can't wait to find out.
The Artefacts will be touring the UK in 2025 and 2026 as part of a new and exciting exhibition, Gladiators of Britain, which aims to reveal the popularity of gladiators throughout Roman society in Britain and beyond. I'm meeting curators Dr. Richard Hobbs and Dr. Anna Willey, who are going to show me the objects up close. I've been told the artefacts are of all shapes and sizes. First up is the smallest of the bunch, a very special Roman coin.
Anna, I mean, coins, they always seem so deceptive, don't they? You know, maybe at first glance they don't look that impressive, but the devil's in the detail. And this one, it looks astonishing. What is this coin?
It's a bronze coin, a sestertius, which should have been used, for example, when going grocery shopping, so it was a very common kind of coin. And this one shows the Colosseum on it, which is very special.
So that's the Colosseum right there that
Yes.
you can see. Wow.
The Colosseum was the single greatest and largest amphitheatre in the Roman Empire and features heavily in both Gladiator movies. It's astonishing to see it depicted here in miniature on this Roman coin. Made of copper alloy, the coin has a diameter of 31 millimetres. That's bigger than any British coin today.
And I've got, just like for size comparison, I've got here an everyday 2p kind of copper coin. So it's just a little bit bigger, isn't it? But a bit thicker at the same time. And this was an everyday coin that many Romans would have had in their pockets or their arm purses or whatever when going down to the forum, the marketplace or wherever.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting. And so, let's talk through some of the detail of this coin. So we've got the Colosseum in the middle, but so what can we see on the Colosseum? What have we got in the details here?
We see the Colosseum from the side, so we can see some of the front of the building with the arcades. So there are several levels. You can see arcades, and if you look very closely, you can see little statues in the arches as well.
God, I can't even see it, but you can see, yeah, you can 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of arches, because to really emphasise the multi-storey nature of this building, and that's where the statues are shown.
Yes, there are three levels of arcades or arches, and then a top level. And a top level, in this case, you can see is where all of these little sticks are.
Oh yes, just pointing out.
Pointing out, and these are poles, wooden poles that held the awnings that could have been put on a hot day, and they were operated by soldiers from the Roman fleet, by Roman Marines.
Well, how so? Why the soldiers?
Because it was like
putting up hoisting a sail.
So it's rigging basically for the awnings. that you can see here.
I mean, that's so interesting because I remember I was in Pompeii recently and looking at some of the graffiti where it talks about gladiator shows, and one of the things to tempt people in was also saying, oh, we have awnings on the day as well.
Yeah.
So it's a funny kind of thing that we sometimes forget about with these great gladiatorial arenas, including the Colosseum, that one of the great attractions of going was the opportunity to sit in the shade during the day, during a hot day. So it's really interesting. You get like a depiction of that in the coin too.
Yeah.
And so what else can we see here? So we've got the Colosseum in the middle. Can we see the inside of the Colosseum too?
Yeah, you can see part of the arena, and you can see some of the ranks where people would have sat, the audience would have sat.
Right, yes.
And in the arena, you can actually see just about make out two gladiators fighting each other.
How can you see that? That's amazing. So, I can really just you need a microscope
yeah.
only to really see it. So this is an actual gladiator fight happening, and this is what it's depicting, one in the middle of a fight.
Yes, exactly.
Around the side of the coin is its legend, containing titles of the emperor that issued it, Severus Alexander. These particular titles have revealed that the coin was minted in 223 AD.
Okay, 223 AD, so that's quite a bit of time after the Colosseum is built. I mean, why is a picture of the Colosseum put on an everyday Roman coin in 223 AD?
So this coin was issued by the Emperor Severus Alexander, and he issued it because he had done substantial repairs to the Colosseum and reopened it. It had been struck by lightning a few years earlier.
Struck by lightning?
Yes.
Wow.
During the reign of Macrinus, very short-lived reign of Macrinus. And he repaired it and reopened it and then issued this coin to commemorate this. And you can actually see the emperor, again, if you look very closely, one of the three figures standing next to the Colosseum is the emperor, and he's making some kind of sacrifice or offering, probably to give thanks for the building or to commemorate the inauguration or the reopening.
Why? I mean, how often do you see the Colosseum depicted on Roman coins? Why is this particular coin really, really interesting and significant?
It's not very often that we see this building on coins. There was one very similar one coined, issued when the Colosseum was first inaugurated in 80 AD by the Emperor Titus. And then at some later stages, when substantial works were done or repairs, as in the case of Severus Alexander, then they would issue similar coins again. But these are quite rare finds, actually.
Very few images of the Colosseum survive from Roman times, which makes this coin all the more fascinating. On its other side is the portrait of Severus Alexander wearing a laurel wreath. Severus was the last of the Severian dynasty. Regularly described as weak and controlled by his mother, his reign preceded decades of crisis in the Roman Empire.
I mean, he looks very young, doesn't he? Barely a teenager.
Yes, he was actually only 14 years old when his reign started, and he would have been probably 15 when this coin was issued.
Probably 15, wow.
He took over after his cousin was murdered, Elagabalus, who was also very young, actually.
And the writing, is that just the writing of his titles?
Yes, that's his name in this case.
So this must be really important if he's deciding to put on his coinage, which would be seen by many Romans presumably, that I guess one of his achievements, the reopening of the Colosseum, does that also hint at the continued, the real big importance of gladiators in Roman society to everyday life in ancient Rome?
Yes, it does. The Colosseum was actually originally 140 years earlier by Titus and even by his predecessor Vespasian, meant to be a gift to the public, a gift to the population of Rome. And the games that took place there, the Gladiator games, were also a gift to the people as well. And Severus Alexander, by restoring the building and again opening it for the people, of course, puts himself in this tradition.
He's renewing the gift of gladiators to the people of Rome. Okay, Anna, this is slightly different to the coin we've had before. Much bigger, don't need a microscope. Much more shiny as well. What is this?
It's actually an oil lamp.
An oil lamp?
Yes, so oil lamps were used in antiquity to light domestic spaces, for example. And this one you can see at the front has a little hole where the wick would have sat. In the back there's another hole to pour the oil in to refill the hot
That's where they
oil.
pour the oil in as well. And it's something we take for granted today, the fact that we have lights in every room at the, just a click of a switch or flick of a switch. Back then, were oil lamps like these, would there have been many of them in every house to ensure that they had light at night?
No, probably not. There would have been a few of these, and they could have been also carried around when you moved from one space to another, for example. So it's not something that everyone had dozens of in their house.
Beautifully preserved and astonishing to hold up close, the whole lamp is shaped like a gladiator's helmet. Specifically, a type of gladiator called a thrace, or Thracian.
You can see the visor in the front.
Yes.
And it would have had a grill. So this is represented by these little holes or dots. And then it has a broad rim, and on the top a crest, which ends in the face of a bird, maybe an eagle. And this lamp also has a hole at the top, so it could have been suspended as well as put on the surface.
So not just almost like the eye of the bird, it had a practical function as well, do we think?
Yes, I think actually the eye is just in front of the
hole.
hole. Yeah.
My apologies, I thought that was the eye straight away. And I'm guessing most oil lamps wouldn't have been as elaborate as this. Was this just, do we think, for someone who just really liked gladiators and decides to get one in the shape of a gladiator helmet?
So we see these lamps from across the empire, but most of them don't have this nice green glaze. They are just terracotta lamps. But we think of them as a kind of souvenir or merchandise that was perhaps bought at the games and then brought home to remember this event. But this lamp is also interesting because of the glaze, which is a lead glaze, which is wasn't very widely used. So this has a hint of luxury to it as well. So it would have been probably quite a special item to its owner.
The oil lamp was made in Cologne on the River Rhine. Cologne was founded by the Romans 2,000 years ago and became a thriving city at the edge of the empire, home to artisans of all trades, presumably including those who created special gladiator souvenirs like this oil lamp.
So they were locally produced to commemorate the games that happened in the provinces as well. This one in particular was found in a sarcophagus. That again points to the fact that this was probably a special item because it was given into the grave of the deceased.
But it's also interesting, so we've gone from the coin, showing like the Colosseum in the heart of the Roman Empire, to Cologne. Gladiators were a big thing for the people.
Yes, I think so, but also this has an interesting connection to Rome itself because in Cologne was the base of the Roman fleet on the Rhine, the Classis Germanica. And we know that soldiers of the Roman fleet were involved in operating the awnings in the Colosseum.
It's the marine link we can kind of bring between the coin and the camera. I mean, it is such a stunning object. How old do we think this is?
It was made around 200 AD.
200 AD, it's almost 2,000 years old, and yet it almost looks brand new. It has survived in such astonishing condition.
Yes.
Next up, Anna's colleague Dr. Richard Hobbs is going to show me two items that were discovered a little closer to home.
So Richard, this little figurine here, are we moving on to gladiators in Roman Britain now?
Yes, because this was found in Colchester.
Colchester.
Which was the most important town in early Roman Britain. It was found in the late 19th century, so unfortunately we don't know very much about him. But obviously a lot of material has been found in different places, and a lot of our collections come from that period. And often we don't have a great deal of information, but luckily we do at least know it's Colchester, and that helps quite a lot.
Colchester, which was known to the Romans as Colonia Claudia Victricensis, was an incredibly symbolic town for the Romans. It was the first official Roman colony in Britain, and for a time it also served as the capital of Roman Britannia. Colchester was soon adorned with many great Roman monuments, including, almost certainly, an amphitheatre, although archaeologists have yet to find it. Several gladiator artefacts have been found beneath Colchester, including this small figurine. And what strikes you immediately about it is its white colour. This little figurine was carved out of bone.
We don't know exactly what type of bone, but it's beautifully carved, and it's a figurine, although it might, we don't know for certain, it may be part of the handle of an object, possibly a knife. But again, it's not quite clear. The reason we say that is it resembles a lot of the handles that we get from known knives. So it would have had a metal component, of course.
And what are the details that we can see on this particular gladiator? I must admit, I'm drawn to that shield, first of all.
On the shield itself, there is a gladiator combat in progress where you see the figure of the gladiator defeating his opponent.
So this is almost Inception. This is the gladiator of the gladiator.
Well, exactly, yeah. And that is interesting because in his other hand, we're not sure, he might be holding a palm frond, and that would be the symbol of victory.
Right.
On the other hand, though, he might just be holding a short sword, the gladius, because that's what they used. And in fact, the word gladiator comes from gladius, these short swords that have got a blade on both sides. So he might be holding that. But on the other hand, again, sort of jumping back to the idea of it being a palm frond, you'll notice that he has a dagger in his belt.
Look at that, yeah.
He's wearing a helmet with a visor, and he's of the Meroë class of gladiator. Basically, gladiatorial combat normally sets up a heavily armed opponent versus a lighter, more agile one.
They like that contrast,
They like that
in
contrast.
the shows.
They like that contrast in the shows. And so he would have been in the more heavily armed class. Usually they would have a breastplate. There's no obvious sign of a breastplate, interestingly. He'd have had a protective greave on his leg, and he'd have had a protective, what's called a manica on his arm.
Yes, a manica, yes, yeah.
To protect the arm as he fights.
And it looks kind of like a decorated belt there as well, and a small loincloth.
Yes, he's wearing a loincloth, thankfully, and the belt is obviously to hold the weapon.
So interesting. So if you think this, potentially the handle of a knife or something like that. So that kind of object, and you have a depiction of a gladiator for the hilt.
Yeah.
Do you think that once again shows how, like in Colchester, gladiators were potentially like a big part of Roman life there? Yeah,
I mean, there's not a huge amount of evidence for gladiators in Britain, but clearly there were gladiators here, and so yeah, I mean, when Britain became part of an empire, it brought with it all those things that we associate with Rome, the games being part of that.
More than 10 Roman amphitheatres have so far been discovered across Britain. Combine that with artefacts like this figurine, and the evidence for gladiators in Britain is pretty unequivocal. But this evidence, well, it isn't just depictions of gladiators and building remains. There's also this. This is extraordinary. It feels like the main event.
Yeah, so this is a helmet, fairly obviously, and we believe it's the only certain piece of surviving gladiatorial equipment from Britain.
From Britain.
I mean, we can't be completely certain it's a gladiator's helmet, but there are many features of it which would suggest that it probably is. So it compares quite well with some of the helmets discovered in Pompeii, the best surviving set of gladiatorial equipment, obviously surviving because of the eruption of Vesuvius in AD 79 and so on. And the other thing to say is that the style of the helmet, with this very broad neck guard.
Yes, look at that. Yeah.
And you've also got this brow ridge guard on the front as well, rim guards. And also the rivet holes at the front, they match well with the placing of a visor, so how the visor would have hung, and also the eye, they would have had these sort of eye protectors on the visor as well. So for all those reasons, we're fairly confident it is a gladiator's helmet. It would have been worn by provocateur type gladiator. This is one of the more heavily armed types.
It feels suitable for a helmet like this, doesn't it?
Yeah, it weighs about 2.5 kilos, which is quite heavy. Having said that, the ones from Pompeii on average are 4 kilograms, so they're even heavier. That's probably because they are also embossed. They often have these very elaborate, embossing with various things. This doesn't have that. It's fairly plain. And the armour that this type of gladiator would have worn, he would have worn a helmet like this. He'd have had a gladius,
so the short sword,
a shield, a leg protector, and an arm protector.
And a manica, yes.
And normally they're pitted against each other. Unusually, it's normally one against the other. So it would have been a fairly evenly balanced fight between two quite heavily armed gladiators.
This helmet is an extraordinary relic of Roman Britain, It's incredible to look upon it today and think about who might have worn it into the arena. But as impressive as it is, it's nothing compared to how it originally looked. Gladiator fights were shows, with fighters adorned with highly decorated equipment, and that included their helmets.
What do we know about the metal, the whole composition of this helmet?
Okay, so interestingly, we've actually only fairly recently looked at this, the metallic composition of this. The metal is very interesting because it's actually brass. Now that basically means it's an alloy of copper with lots of zinc, and it gives a very bright, shiny, golden appearance.
Okay, yes.
But the interesting thing too is that this helmet has evidence of tinning. So this is basically tin put on a surface. So I think we can't be certain, but I think what they're trying to do is give an idea of something that looks like it's gold and silver.
So it's silver. So the tin is kind of reflecting that
exactly.
silver colour.
So it would have been very bright and shiny. Obviously, these combats happen during the day, so hopefully, if you get a nice bright sunny day, you're going to get a lot of reflection. You know. So it's clearly they've clearly chosen those metals for that reason. The other thing to mention is that the particular composition matches very closely to coin composition for brass coins of the early Roman period. So the other thing we can say is, and again we can't be certain, but this probably dates from the conquest period.
Interesting.
So that's from roughly AD 43 to the beginning of the Flavian period, so up to about 69. So we're looking at that period when this has come into Britain. Also, it's not likely to have been made here.
Right, so it's imported into Britain. It's brought with the Romans here.
It's brought in with the Romans here.
The helmet was discovered in 1965 near the village of Hawkton in Suffolk, when a farmer struck this object as he was ploughing one of his fields. The separate brow guard was not recognised at the time, and it was only in 2001 that it was reunited with the helmet. If this helmet does date to the early Roman period, then it's almost 2,000 years old.
So Suffolk, potentially early Roman period, brought with the Romans. So could this be something like Colchester, one of those kind of nodes of Romanness at that time?
It could be. I mean, it's a nice thing to think. I mean, it probably hadn't travelled too far from its original place of use. So Colchester is a good option. Maybe London. I mean, London has the amphitheatre underneath the Guildhall.
Yes, it was originally made of wood, wasn't it?
That's right. Very sizable, 100 metres in length, could seat 7,000 spectators. So it might be London. Given where it's discovered and given its date, we're talking the conquest period. As we know, in AD 60, we have the revolt by Boudicca, who leads a revolt against Roman occupation. It might possibly have been looted from Colchester at that point, or perhaps even London. We know that Boudicca's forces attacked both places. Aside from that, we can only really speculate as to its kind of life use, really.
But this is such a fascinating example. I know, as you said, it's not 100% certain if it is a gladiator helmet, but you've got that evidence from Pompeii and places to bring into this. I mean, if it is, this is one of the best archaeological discoveries ever made for gladiators in Roman
absolutely,
Britain.
and it may be that we never find another piece of equipment like it. You know, it's very important in that sense, and it's fantastic that we have it here in the British Museum,
and that you're still doing to this day more research about it, to learn more about it.
And this kind of this method of looking at these metals in fine detail is really improving greatly what we understand about these objects, where they might have been found, because the trace elements can tell us about signatures of the metal composition, and therefore you can start to build up patterns about what British metal work looks like in comparison to stuff made elsewhere. So that's why we think this was probably made on the continent and imported. So that tells us about a journey, and journeys are so important, of course, in the ancient world.
It is an amazing object. I'm so grateful that you've been able to take it out and show me right here today.
I'm very happy to be able to do so.
These fascinating artefacts are just a few of the showstoppers that will be touring the UK in a brand new exhibition between January 2025 and April 2026, Gladiators of Britain. You can find out more about it and where it will be showing on the British Museum's website.
The team at the British Museum have invited me here to have a look at some extraordinary ancient artefacts up close. Special access. Naturally, straight away I said yes, but there is a catch. I've no idea what these objects are. All I know is that they're to do with ancient Sudan. So let's go and have a look.
The artefacts will be part of an exhibition touring the UK called Ancient Sudan Enduring Heritage. Curator Dr. Loretta Kilroe has agreed to show me them in their study room. But en route, walking through the galleries, there's another artefact that Loretta says we must see.
This is the first object that we're going to have a look at.
Ah, okay, I recognise this one. So it is Roman, we should mention that straight away, shouldn't we?
This piece has such a wonderful story to tell about Sudan, and I think people sometimes miss that. So this is a very classic Roman statue of the Emperor Augustus.
And how can you tell it's Augustus? Is it the eyes? Is it the whole facial expression?
When the head was originally found, it was identified as classically Hellenistic. The bronze material, which would have originally been covered by plaster, is quite typical of the time period. The slight turn of the head and the hair, they are very similar to contemporaneous stone statues that we have of Augustus. So it was narrowed down to likely being him.
So originally this would have had plaster on top of the bronze, so it's different how it looks.
Yes, there's a few traces still on the forehead. Whereas the eyes, which are very unusual to survive, they're made of calcite and glass.
The eyes are beautiful, aren't they? I see very few statues that still have the eyes intact within them.
It's beautifully preserved. We have almost nothing else that is as well preserved. And the reason it's so preserved is because it wasn't found in Egypt or anywhere else in the Roman Empire. It was found buried underneath the entrance to a temple in Meroë, about 200 kilometers north of Khartoum in modern Sudan.
Meroë was the capital of the ancient kingdom of Kush. Its people were known as the Kushites. Today, Meroë is famous for its pyramidal structures that protrude from the desert sands. During Augustus's reign, the Romans incorporated Egypt into their empire. Roman control stretched as far south as Philae and the Nile's first cataract. But this expansion also put them into direct contact and conflict with the powerful kingdom of Kush.
Why does this head end up in Sudan?
We're not entirely sure. The head was discovered in 1910 by an archaeologist called John Garstang, and it was a complete surprise. And everyone was amazed by the fact there was a Roman piece so far south in Sudan. We know that there was a war in Egypt and with the Kushites between 25 BC to 22 BC. The historian Strabo talks about this. What we think happened is that the Kushites swept into Egypt. We know from Strabo's story that they burned temples and they attacked the Romans and they decapitated statues. This piece has been very neatly decapitated.
Oh yeah, so that's it. The head has just been cut off.
Absolutely.
So this is an amazing artefact that might corroborate with an ancient literary source. So archaeology and literature going together to learn more about the story, the context behind this object.
Strabo talks about this war in a little bit more detail. He mentions a warrior queen, a one-eyed warrior queen he calls Kandake. We think that this queen may be identified with Queen Amon-Ra, whose title as queen was Kandake. So we think the Romans are getting a little bit confused here. Amon-Ra is particularly interesting because she is in the middle of a line of warrior queens, female regents, and that's what Kush, I think, is particularly interesting for this powerful role of women that we see across the kingdom. The story goes that she swept into Upper Egypt, was pushed back by the Romans as far as Napata, which was the earlier capital of the Kushite kingdom, but then the Kushites pushed them back again. And this is where the story gets a little bit hazy. Strabo says that the Romans were winning, but Amon-Ra sends ambassadors to sue for peace. And Augustus agrees with no conditions on Kush, doesn't make them a province, doesn't make them give any tribute. It seems likely, in my opinion, that the Kushites were probably winning.
It seems like they did have something on their side to get that kind of treaty, doesn't it?
And they must have been quite powerful to push the Roman army back.
It's amazing to think that this decapitated bronze statue head may have been a trophy, captured by Amon-Ra and her soldiers whilst raiding Roman Egypt. Its detail and accompanying story makes this one of the most extraordinary artefacts at the British Museum.
Well, this is an amazing start. What an object to see right up close. It is absolutely stunning. Now, I know I'm here to talk about ancient Sudan and look at this exhibition, these objects. I don't know what they are yet, but I'm guessing I'm about to find out.
Absolutely.
What have we got here? This is quite the piece we have in front of us.
So this is an offering table that would have been placed outside of a tomb of an elite, probably man, sometimes woman, and used by relatives to bestow nourishment on the deceased after death. What we call it is pouring libations. So they would pour a liquid in here, so it could be beer, wine, water, or milk. This would then overflow, go into this channel around the side, and then run down the spout. And this would symbolically nourish the deceased.
Beer, wine, water, or milk. I mean, I probably prefer beer of all of those ones. That's an interesting selection of different liquids that the deceased could have be offered to them.
Yes, and then it would basically create all the food the deceased would need. So you can see on the offering table we have different types of bread.
Oh, that's bread, is
Yes.
it? Oh, you see this little kind of vertical lines. Interesting.
The pouring of libations would create these for the deceased. Just like in ancient Egypt, in elite Kushite beliefs, bread was considered quite important. It was less important for ordinary people, but makes a huge appearance in elite contexts.
This offering table dates to the 2nd century AD and is made from sandstone, a common material in ancient Sudan. Almost 2,000 years old, it has survived incredibly well.
This would have been placed outside of an elite burial, right in front of the tomb chapel entrance. You would bring your family on special festivals to remember your ancestors. You would go and you would pour your libations in front of the tomb chapel.
So this is like paying your respects to the dead, to an important family member, someone who's passed. This is you showing them that you're remembering them, almost like laying flowers on a grave today.
Absolutely. It was considered very important to remember your ancestors and where you're from, as it is in a lot of families today. And by doing this, you can honour them, but you also provide them with nourishment and sustenance in the afterlife. So you're almost keeping them alive.
The details of this offering table are striking and reveal a close link to Egypt.
So you can see on the left, this is a representation of Anubis.
Oh, the Egyptian, the god of the underworld.
Yes, so linked with the Egyptian god of the underworld, exactly. And the same on the right, we have the goddess Nephthys, who again is quite familiar from the Egyptian pantheon. You recognise the deities based on the headdresses in particular, Anubis's ears and the headdress on Nephthys.
It's the jackal of Anubis,
yes,
isn't it?
Exactly.
Yes.
But they don't look Egyptian. They are clearly hybridized with local belief systems. The reason that we are getting these Egyptianized elements on a Kushite object is because much earlier during the Egyptian New Kingdom, the Egyptians conquered Sudan and colonized it for about 500 years. And so over those 500 years, there was a lot of exchange of ideas, iconography, religious belief, and the Kushites took what they thought was interesting and relevant from Egyptian religion and reused it to express their own religious and cultural beliefs. So it's a hybridization. There's also elements of wider Mediterranean cultures in Kushite iconography as well, but it's always used to show a distinctly Kushite worldview.
And shall we focus also on this shallow bowl in the middle where the libations were poured? I noticed at the bottom though you also have that line, and that reminds me of those royal symbols in hieroglyphs. That is a cartouche.
Yes, exactly. So again, this is not from a royal burial, so this has been reused for elite belief systems. I think this is probably one of those Egyptianized elements.
So that frame which you have around it, artistically it's lovely because it keeps that image within, but it also has a practical purpose
exactly.
too.
The Kushite kind of iconography is very focused on that, very similar to how we would recognise Egyptian iconography to be. But again, we're seeing very different elements.
Surrounding this frame is one final piece of detail that gives this object a personal touch.
It almost looks like, to my eyes, a pattern all the way around the far edges of this offering table. What is this pattern?
This is an inscription. This is in the indigenous language Meroitic.
Oh, this is writing. This
Yes.
is Kushite writing.
So the offering table itself dates to around the 2nd century AD, Meroitic as a language comes in around 300 BC and lasts till around 400 AD. Meroitic could be written in Meroitic hieroglyphs or it could be written in cursive. This is the cursive, and this is a classic inscription accompanying the offering table. It tells us that it belongs to a person called Cannibalile.
Oh wow, okay, good pronunciation there.
We're not sure if this is a man or a woman because there's no gender in Meroitic.
If we know a bit about what it says, has it been deciphered like with hieroglyphs?
So Meroitic is semi-deciphered. There are a lot of linguists who are still working on it, and we do discover new words every day. We don't have a Rosetta Stone of Meroitic, so it's been a lot harder to identify what all the letters mean. But clearly this person had access to a lot of wealth and resources. This was placed outside a very fine tomb in the site of Pharas, which is a large necropolis that is now flooded under Lake Nasser, Lake Nubia.
Oh wow, so to have this is pretty special because you can't now reach that site anymore.
Absolutely, so this is kind of all we have. The site was excavated in the early 1900s and never fully published. So the collection that we have from Pharas is really important for understanding it.
I mean, it's such an extraordinary object, isn't it? Because it can talk to you more about, their ideas towards the dead, towards worship, their relationships with Egypt, but also, of course, with language and culture. This gives you so many different ways to learn more about the Kushite kingdom.
Absolutely, and it was still in situ when it was excavated, so we know that it was exactly where people thousands of years ago would have gone up to it and poured their libations thinking of their ancestors.
Now, Loretta, this is the face of a goddess.
Exactly, this is a really special piece. We think this represents the goddess Isis, who originally came to Sudan during the Egyptian New Kingdom, but was adopted quite quickly by the indigenous people. And in ancient Kush, Isis was hugely popular. She appears in multiple temples. In fact, it's the Kushites who end up worshipping Isis long into the Christian period.
Isis was one of the most important goddesses of Egyptian religion. She is often associated with motherhood, healing, fertility, magic, and the afterlife. This object depicts Isis in human form as a beautiful woman. It was discovered in a temple at a site called Kawa in the northern Dongola Reach in Sudan. A royal hieroglyphic inscription on the object's front, known as a cartouche, mentions the Kushite king Anarkamani, who ruled in the early 3rd century BC. He was known as Beloved of Isis.
Do we think that this was the head of a statuette of Isis within this temple? I mean, what was its function?
No, instead, it's likely that this was the front of a ritual boat that was used to transport the statue of a god between temple spaces, that will have been carried by priests from one temple to another across Sudan.
Carried across Sudan? So was that boat not actually in the water? Was it being carried by people
Yes,
above
so
them?
it's better to think of it as more like a bark.
That's like in ancient Egypt where you have the carrying of the sacred bark between temples.
It's a ritual space. So the deity in the boat cannot leave a sacred space. It would go from temple to sacred bark to temple. You can obviously see the size of the bark as well based on she's quite small. There was probably one of these on the front and one of them on the back. Here are the attachments where she would have been tied to the prow of the boat. She was also a lot more elaborate originally. So you can see there is a hole on the top. This was where a vulture headdress probably went.
Right.
Possibly in gold and wood. This may well have been removed every time she was brought back to the temple. She also would have had inlaid eyes, again, probably with a precious stone.
One of the most striking things of the statue today, that those inlaid eyes are no longer there, and it looks like it's just staring through into your soul.
Absolutely, and I mean, that's so common because they're made of much more precious materials. It's actually very unusual that this has survived as well as it has because it's made of bronze, and often that was melted down in later periods to be reused for something else.
Objects like this added to the magnificence of the whole procession. The face of the goddess Isis at the tips of this elaborate ship of the gods that was transported from temple to temple, gleaming in the sunlight.
It will have been a really awe-inspiring sight. And temples were restricted spaces. You've not got people going into temples to pray, like a modern church. So this is one of the only times ordinary people would have seen a deity.
I mean, look at some of the other details as well. I can see a bit of a necklace. Then you have also this big collar as well with a falcon on each side.
Yes, these are representing Horus, who you'll be familiar with from the Egyptian pantheon.
Right.
This is a sign of wealth. This represents a gold and jewelled collar that people would have worn. You can see the remains of her feather headdress. Another reason we think this is Isis.
Look at that.
There is a hole at the back where the headdress would have been tied in and secured. There's also one at the front. And then the rest of this is her ritual wig. It's unlikely that people had hair like this, so she's wearing a very formal wig.
To have this bronze representation of Isis survive almost 2,000 years and in such good condition is extremely rare.
When she was discovered in the temple at Cawer, it was very, very exciting. We are obviously missing a lot of precious materials from archaeological sites because they have been reused and recycled by ancient peoples. So the fact that we now have a glimpse into her face, I think, is quite remarkable. It's also a really nice attestation of Anakamani. This is written in hieroglyphs. And as a reminder, people are still using hieroglyphs in the early Kushite period, and later we find Meroitic hieroglyphs based on earlier Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Once again, it's that mixing of Egyptian culture with Kushite culture.
This hybridization, the Kushites are taking what they thought was useful and convenient from Egyptian iconography and using it for their own belief system.
Well, it's absolutely stunning. What an object. And as you just said there, and as I said at the beginning, this is the face of a goddess. It's amazing.
So this is a beautiful storage jar made of Nile silt, so made from clay that is just found along the banks of the Nile. This is from a probably official workshop at Pharos. This is made on the potter's wheel. This is not particularly popular in Sudan until the Kushite period, so this is quite a Kushite form of manufacturing. It's then been fired and covered in a slip and decorated. So a slip is a clay and paint mix that mirrors a nice fine coating to make the pot look a bit neater. And then this has been painted with ochre and carbon in particular.
Ochre and carbon. Oh, the ochre is the red, I'm guessing, and
Yes,
the carbon is the black.
Exactly.
The pot dates to the 2nd century AD and was discovered at Pharos, similar to the offering table. It was crafted from clay sourced from the river Nile and produced on a Kushite potter's wheel. This type of pot was used to store liquid, possibly beer, but it was also meant to be seen, hence the impressive decoration.
I've never seen crocodiles depicted in quite a way like this before.
They look quite happy, actually. Crocodiles are shown in 2 different ways in ancient Kush. They are often shown as almost like an enemy, shown attacking people in temple reliefs. They would represent a generic evil. If you're living by the Nile, a crocodile is a huge threat to you, and they do eat people. So they are a very real fit for the Kushites living alongside the water.
So they put a menacing image on this pot.
So we have the menacing images on the one hand, but we also have crocodiles represented in their natural environment.
Right, okay.
And so this is slightly different. They probably represent the fertility and fecundity of the Nile.
Many Kushites were farmers. They irrigated the land next to the Nile and grew various crops such as wheat and barley, cotton too.
We always think of the Nile in ancient Egypt, but of course the Nile flows down into Sudan and ancient Kush. So I'm guessing the Nile was also really important for the Kushites.
Absolutely, and particularly in Lower Nubia, where this piece was found, the agricultural land is quite narrow. So the Nile is really, really important for people. Pharos seems to have been quite a fertile area, so a lot of people congregated here. And again, there will have been crocodiles, people will have seen them, but they then will have become linked in people's imagination with the fertility of the land.
So we can see the long tails of the crocodiles, and also like the scales on top, these kind of triangular, kind of canine tooth-shaped scales. They're very reddish in its colour as well with the feet, but also like a band of grey too.
I always think this looks a little bit like the crocodile is wearing a necklace, which I don't think it is. I think this is just meant to represent the neck area. And then you can see the snout is curving up. The eyes have been very carefully rendered.
I can see the eye as well, that little rim.
Exactly, and the claws. The crocodile has very, very large claws. They haven't shown the teeth, which are obviously a very important element of the crocodile, and generally visible even when the crocodile has its mouth closed. This might be a deliberate choice to make sure that the crocodile can't harm anyone. So we do see this in amulets sometimes. A dangerous creature is neutralized by having a leg removed or its teeth removed or something.
Interesting. So the crocodile, this was a popular image that the Kushites, whether it's potters or artists or stonemasons or whoever, that they liked to add to their work.
Very popular, and what we're seeing particularly in Lower Nubia is a huge interest in showing floral and faunal motifs on pottery. So the crocodile is part of a much wider trend. We see cattle, there's quite a few giraffes on pots, there's an awful lot of floral motifs like lotuses, grapes are very popular, particularly for wine cups. There's clearly an interest in showing the natural world on pottery.
Crocodile art was certainly in fashion in ancient Sudan 2,000 years ago. But interestingly, whoever painted this pot decided to only decorate the top. A black and red band separates the crocodiles from the rest of the bare orange ceramic.
This is very common. The decoration would be restricted to what we call a register. And so you can see in here the decoration is contained. It's very interesting that the decoration is on the top. Usually the decoration is on the side, even on large storage jars. So it suggests that this piece was very much designed to be seen from the top. It's probably in a stand in a house, and this is then found in a burial. So this accompanied an individual to the afterlife, so that they had all the fancy foods and drinks that they had in life, in death.
Oh right, so once again, this is kind of giving the dead person something that they believe they're giving it to them in the next world.
Exactly.
With Kushite afterlife, I know in ancient Egypt there's this belief that there were creatures in the afterlife like crocodiles and going along a river. Do we think that they would have thought that there had been crocodiles or similar kind of beasts in the Kushite afterlife?
So we unfortunately don't know. There aren't as many texts in ancient Kush as there are in ancient Egypt. So we know that they seem to have had very different belief systems. Pottery is very highly valued in ancient Kush, so maybe, but it has to remain a hypothesis for now, unfortunately.
For our last object, Loretta wanted to show me something that connects ancient Sudan with the present day, a symbol of the country's enduring heritage.
This doesn't look ancient to me, I must admit.
No, so this is completely different. This is one of our more modern pieces from the collection. This is what's called a tabak, which is a food cover. This was brought to the museum in 1960 by a collector called Paul Wilson, and it was made in a town called Meroë in Darfur.
But what's the link to antiquity here?
Items like this remind people that Sudan's fascinating heritage and culture is not just in the past, it is very much in the present. Items like tabaks are still passed down through families, made by craftsmen and women across the country. Now, traditionally, people in Sudan have passed down a folk tale that tabaks are linked to ancient Sudan.
Right.
Something that everyone always thought was a legend, but when I was excavating in Sudan recently, I found loads of pieces of matting inside a jar, dating to the Egyptian colonial period, the New Kingdom.
That's like the 2nd millennium BC, isn't it?
Yes, and when I reconstructed it, it made a tabak.
Wow.
It's much smaller tabak than this, but...
So there is archaeological evidence for an ancient version of this being used some 4,000 years ago in that same area of the world, in Sudan.
Absolutely, and so many of these traditions are passed down by women in this very long-standing community of practice, and women are often still invisible in the archaeological record, so looking at modern pieces like this can help us perhaps try to interpret the past slightly better.
What strikes you when looking at this tabak is its intricate rings of patterns.
And talk to me about this decoration, the various colours that we can see.
We don't 100% understand the meaning of all the decorations, but what is clear is that they are individual. They almost represent a signature. This particularly large tabak is known as like a 40-day tabak, and this would have been brought out for special occasions like a wedding. Everybody would have brought their own tabak to cover food, and at the end you would need to get your own tabak back. So you need to kind of look at this as almost like identity markers. There's also discussions that the shape and the colours link to the sun and its brightness.
Is it possible that tabaks back in ancient times, the Kingdom of Kush, or the tabak equivalent, may well have been similarly bright and elaborate in their design?
I'd say almost definitely. Just like we saw with the pot before, there are ways of making bright colours, even in ancient times. These are dyed using modern dyes. We have some samples in the museum of the dye themselves, but the piece that I found in my archaeological site in Sudan, the weaving is exactly the same, and it's not difficult to imagine colours coming into that.
Well, Loretta, it has been extraordinary to have a look at all these different objects. Tell me a bit about the exhibition coming up, which features...
The exhibition is intending to introduce the Kingdom of Kush to new audiences. In each venue, we are working closely with Sudanese diaspora communities who are also doing their own displays, which I'm very excited to see. So I hope that anyone who comes will learn more about ancient Sudan and be interested in learning more about this fascinating culture.
This has been absolutely incredible. As these objects have shown, there is so much to learn and to explore about ancient Sudan, the Kingdom of Kush, and its amazing culture, and how it interacted with nearby cultures, whether that be Egypt, Greece or Rome. And it has been such a pleasure to learn more about it today.
The exhibition will be touring the UK between February and November in 2025. It is called Ancient Sudan, Enduring Heritage. You can find out more about it on the British Museum's website, and by clicking a link in the description below.